they really were talking about how early workforce development should be occurring, because they're saying people are graduating with these 4-year degrees and 3/4 of them are taking jobs that don't require that degree. So it kind of leads you into, that, and Pat took that opportunity to say that STEM school they were going to put by the college was a good idea then. It's a better idea now. And it feels like our county needs it because of all the jobs. Anytime any industry comes to the area. I probably should have prefaced that this data is so good because we're partnered with the Southeastern Partnership, which is about 17 counties. It's 7 counties, I'm sorry. It's Southeastern Partnership. And so we have this expert data analytics guy. And so really the regional power we have is probably more important than ever, because we have some weakness in workforce development, and our other towns make up for it. And so basically they're just saying that we're going to have to probably we can't understand, for example, there's 10% less enrollment in community colleges, but there's a need for workforce development. So there's a disconnect somewhere in the middle school, high school system in workforce development. So that's a long one, but it was an incredible. Judy, you're going to love it. It's some incredible data for helped me with clients. It's just some impressive work, and the bottom line is it gives us the data to not guess on where our opportunities are. We know where our opportunities are, and I complete my report.
Kevin, thanks very much. I think the one other point we heard this morning, which is yet to come maybe in the next few weeks, is a specific report that details what they call the golf chain. What they mean by that is the chain of business linkages that come from the golf industry. And that is a specific concept that we here in Moore County, and certainly in Pinehurst and our surrounding towns and counties, want to be aware of, as that emphasis on the golf industry, which is centered here, can start to play a role and help development across other parts of this county, but also other counties in central North Carolina. So that report, coming in a couple more weeks, will be of great interest to not only our village council, but the whole Moore County and related county governments in our area. I'd like to ask Jane Hogeman, do you have some reports for this week, Jane?
I do not, John.
All right. Lydia, your reports?
Yes, John, thank you so much. Last week, I had the opportunity to speak to a ladies' luncheon at the resort. They asked me to speak on the Pinehurst Historic Landmark District, something I love to talk about, but it gave me an opportunity to dig once again. I don't know if you guys can see it, this amazing book that Jack Farrell wrote, The Founding of the Village of Pinehurst, and also to delve into our nomination again. And I came away once again appreciating the vision that James Walker Tufts had, and to hire Frederick Law Olmsted and his firm, and to bring Donald Ross in here. What a genius he was. And once again, I appreciated just the role that Pinehurst has played in the game, in the development of the game of golf. So I've got this show down pat. If anybody else wants me to come give the show to them, I'm delighted to do it. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Lydia. That'll conclude our comments from the senior staff and the council members. And we'll move on into agenda item number 3, which is a motion to approve our consent agenda. These are items that have been previously reviewed by council and are approved all at one time. Before I ask for a motion, however, does any council member have any question or comment, or wish any of the consent agenda items pulled out for further discussion? No. Seeing none, we'll move along. Is there a motion then to approve the consent agenda for March 9th?
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
There is a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous, Kelly. Thank you. That will end the consent agenda, and we'll move to item number 4, which is a motion to recess the regular meeting and enter into a public hearing as described in the agenda for tonight. Is there a motion to recess the regular meeting and enter into a public hearing?
I'll move to recess the regular meeting and enter into a public hearing.
I'll second that.
The motion's by Jane Hogeman and the second's by Kevin Drum. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously, and we are now in a public hearing. I will call on Jeff Sanborn to make whatever introductory remarks he has, and I know we'll be hearing from other staff members as a part of that. Jeff?
Thanks, John. This is obviously a continuation of a discussion that we've been having for quite some time, and a continuation of the discussion the council had at the last meeting. And there have been some changes to the language in this draft ordinance since the last meeting. We recognized coming out of that meeting that this draft ordinance had kind of been mischaracterized as a tree preservation ordinance, when really what it is a vegetative buffering ordinance update. And so that's primarily the nature of the changes that we've made to the language in that draft. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Darren to introduce this topic.
Darren, as you do that, I'm going to ask Jason Whitaker if he could come forward and reposition the screens that are in front of me here so I could see them a little better and be on the same track that the rest of you are. And Darren, we look forward to your comments and those of Alex tonight too, I think, as well. Thank you very much. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as Jeff noted, Alex and I are here. I think Kathy's in the planning conference room. So you have the principal staff that's been working and crafting this ordinance for the past few years involved. So Alex and I are going to kind of tag team this presentation. I'm going to start it out, and then Alex will pick it up there in the middle. So now comes the fun technical part where I try and share a screen with you. Because I have a PowerPoint presentation, because you know I carry those. Let's see here. Here. So you should be seeing that right now. Correct? You're seeing that? Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
yeah, something's happening on my screen, so I'm gonna have to look away. Sorry, it's not usually like this. Second. There we go. All right, public hearing number 1. So public hearing number 1 is to discuss proposed text amendments to section 9.5, section 9.14, and chapter 10 of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. And it really gets back to what Jeff had discussed is discussing landscaping buffering development standards. I'll go into these next paragraphs in the next couple slides, but this public hearing is a legislative public hearing per North Carolina general statutes as it relates to the amendment of zoning regulations within the village's jurisdiction. The purpose of these hearings are to solicit public input on the proposed amendment. The public hearing was duly published in the magazine or in the newspaper of record, which is the pilot. I'm going to note that because this is a virtual meeting, that due to the statutory requirement, council actually cannot take action on this proposal this evening. There would have to be a minimum of at least 24 hours between the end of the comments from the public hearing, or when the public hearing is closed, and when council can take action. So it's just a quick note. Tree development standards. Proposed text amendments to section 9.5, 9.14, and chapter 10 definitions of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance to update and enhance landscaping development standards. You're going to hear that time after time with this particular, with our proposal. Our proposal is a development standard. It applies to development. It applies when a development permit is being triggered. It is a development standard. Section 9.5 will provide for the purpose, definitions, clearing and grading. That is a relatively, it's a new section, and Alex will get into a little bit more, but that's an important and significant section. And permits, tree survey requirements, tree removal standards, tree preservation credits, tree removal, exemptions and violations. Section 9.14, that really applies to single family development. It establishes buffer yard requirements for single family development versus the existing tree requirements. And we'll get a little bit into that. There is an existing tree development standard for single-family lots in this community. Chapter 10, which is the definitions chapter, we've added some definitions. I think probably one of the most significant changes is how we've now changed the definition of what a development is. And what we're doing is we're carrying through the 160D, the state statutory definition of development. A little history. If we go back to 1981, when we adopted our first land use policy, the goal, if you look at some of the original statements regarding the land use policy, is the preservation of the environmental and aesthetic character of Pinehurst as it grows and develops will be accomplished through land use regulations. When you start to see the follow-up comprehensive plans, our follow-up PDOs, the importance of the preservation of the environmental and the aesthetic character has been an important factor, important characteristic of our comp plan, of our PDOs. If you look at some of our tree references in our past comprehensive plans, it's gone for there's been some reference and some desire in this community in all three of our comprehensive plans, including the 1995 land use plan. So if you go in 1995, 2003, we had some recommendations. 2010, that's where we started to see some PDO language. 2010, review and revise the PDO to ensure that it requires extensive landscaping within developments and along streets. Then you go again to 2010, enhance existing residential neighborhoods through supporting landscaping, tree planting, and similar programs. Then in our latest comp plan, we have, you go to that third factor, 2019 comp plan, enhance the tree preservation program and standards for tree planting and preservation in the development ordinance. Now we feel that we've been through a lot of years of work on this topic. We felt the ordinance that's been proposed meets a lot of these community desires, meets the state zoning grant of power, and that's why we have it before you. Another reason I wanted to show this why my department, why it's been important to my department. If you look at the 2021 strategy map for planning and inspections, you can start from a customer, promote high quality development and appearance, all the way down to that bottom line for our OFIs, which is enhanced tree preservation program and standards for tree planting. So, when people ask us why we're doing what we're doing, Alex and I and Kathy weren't just sitting around trying to figure out something to do. This was part of a strategic plan that we followed through on. Objectives. So the objectives, when we started to look at this, were to enhance the current landscaping buffering requirements within the PDO in line with the recently adopted 2019 comprehensive plan, and specifically create buffer yards for development. Part of that was to maintain our tree-lined streets. And when you look at some of our standards, when we say maintain tree-lined streets, you'll see with that ratio, the ratio that we have for that street yard planting and buffering is a little bit heavier than the side and rear. And it's to meet those goals of the street character, the tree-lined street character of the community. Updates the landscaping standards for single-family development. And this is where we think we're through some of the discussion that we had with the Planning and Zoning Board and some of the concerns that we heard. We incorporated that whole credit system in there to allow credits for existing qualifying trees to meet the landscaping requirements. And that credit section has evolved significantly from when we started. I think we started it as a 1-for-1 tree credit. That evolved to, I think, we kicked something in at 12 inches. At 16, you get another tree. So the larger the tree that you have on your property, the more it can qualify for an existing landscaping credit. And the one other thing that I need to note, because we hear this a lot, is that you can't remove trees. You can remove trees. Tree removal can still occur with this ordinance. But if what you're doing is considered development, then we're going to look at it and you're going to potentially trigger those buffering requirements. The other thing that doesn't get discussed enough, and we'll talk about a little bit later, is that a lot of this community, I would say the vast majority of developed lots in this community are excluded right now from this ordinance. They're going to go back to the existing ordinance requirements, and again, there is an existing landscaping requirement in our residential code, but they would go back to that. So the vast majority, until you're triggered redevelopment, you can still remove trees. So here are the current landscaping requirements. So when we think that having any landscaping requirements in a residential district is foreign, it's not. We do have a current tree planting requirement, and you can see it right here. If you look at the R5, R8, and R10 district, you start with 4 trees per lot. You go all the way down, so the sliding scale, you go down to R15, R20, and R30, that's 8, and all the way and up to R210, that's 16. And also along with that, you have foundation plantings are also required in all residential developments at this time. Then, on the bottom, we talk about having planted buffer requirements for non-residential uses. We do have that. We have different widths of buffer yards. Alex, did I say we were going to take this up here and talk a little bit about the enabling grant of power?
That's a good point for me to take over. All right. So as Darren said, Darren, Kathy, and myself didn't just sit around, nothing to do, and just start tackling and putting together the language that we have before you today in this public hearing. We specifically looked at the enabling legislation and the grant of power for local subdivisions of the state, counties, and municipalities. So one of the great things about Chapter 160D is not just a consolidation of the enabling legislation for cities and counties, is that it provides for some clarification. It had an opportunity to provide better definitions, better processes, and a few other things that you'll see later on as we come and update our development ordinance and other public hearings to kind of come in line with compliance. Specifically, Chapter 160D, Section 701, talks about the purposes, and in further in 702, the grant of power. So it says that local municipalities or subdivisions of the states may adopt zoning regulations, and then they further put in place specific exceptions. So one of those specific exceptions that we are well aware of over the past, I think 6 years ago, are building design elements, especially how they are applied to development that have to meet the North Carolina Residential Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings. That section continues on to state that building design elements do not include the use of buffering or screening to minimize visual impacts, mitigate the impacts of light and noise, or to protect the privacy of neighbors. So we really looked at that as our basis of building this proposed language that we have before you to these amendments to the PDO. All right, Darren, next. So with that, the next step is to build the purpose and intent for this section. So in line with that, with our explicit purpose here, and with the grant of power from enabling legislation, we specified what we're building this ordinance on right off the bat in Section 9.5.1, which I won't go and read it verbatim for you, but it sets forth that we're establishing buffer yards to help reduce these visual and impacts from noise, dust, odor, and help privacy of neighbors. And also, it's just a byproduct of that. It's going to help with our value of our existing tree canopy and provide incentives to allow for keeping those existing qualifying trees to be used part to meet those requirements. Next. So here we're just going to have a couple of illustrations to kind of paint the picture of what we've been hearing through these previous development approvals that have been gone for public hearing before past councils during the extensive, robust public comment period during the comprehensive plan adoption. On the left, you see it's a snip image of Linden Road. You see a lot of trees there in the right-of-way, but also just past the right-of-way. So you see these tree-lined streets, that visual character that is often referred to here in Pinehurst. On the right is a development that had gone through that there were no landscaping requirements aside from those that Darren already mentioned, where you can just have a number of 4 qualifying trees anywhere on the lot, and they can be grouped together, right amongst one another, and you met the strict application of the ordinance. But is that really the intent? And then we have a couple more examples on the next slide. So here we have the Mercsville Road area. This area was specifically pointed out and discussed a lot during the comprehensive plan process. On the left, you see what Mercsville Road looked like circa 2015, prior to all the homes being developed there. And we know there's some other factors here with development across here, being a state DOT road, as well as the overhead utility lines there. But with the dense vegetation that was there previously, you can hardly see those overhead utility lines. And, we would allow, with the way the ordinance is currently drafted, for smaller trees to be planted in those areas to mitigate any impact on those utilities. So again, you can kind of see what development looks like having to meet the current standards, and a lot of the public input and engagement that we got during the comprehensive plan process is the majority of our residents do not want to see what you see there on the right. And we think this approach can better handle it. Here's an image of an area just off Longleaf in Village Acres neighborhood. So you can see this is just maybe it's less than a mile away from the Mercsville Road area. You can see there's our established neighborhoods, which, as Darren mentioned, would not have to meet the requirements that we have in place now unless they go through redevelopment, which I'll get into in another slide. But you see tree-lined streets, there's trees in the sides. This is actually taken at both the lots to the left and to the right there looking down that street are corner lots. This is taken from a Google Street View image from Longleaf looking down a cul-de-sac. And so there's, obviously I can't manipulate it left or right like I could with Google Street View, but there's dense vegetation there, and that's what we kind of took into account whenever we crafted this ordinance. All right, so we built from the purpose and the intent and the enabling legislation, we decided we're going to create these buffer yards. All right, now we need to have standards. So they need to be objective review standards, something that staff can objectively carry out on a day-to-day basis, application by application. So we based them on calculating tree requirements based on 4 different yards of the lot. This is one change that you guys may have noticed is that we included a side street yard and a definition to go along. There was some confusion about, corner lots would have 2 front yards. Well, we have a side street definition and a side street setback already built in our PDO, so it just seemed logical to include a side street definition in a side street buffer yard. We based the number of required plantings on the linear footage of the yards calculated basically at the setback. So, and we'll go, there's diagrams in the ordinance that show you where you take the measurement from. And then we also allow for a tree planting credit to account for existing trees that are currently on the lot based on size and location. So we would even allow for some grouping. We could even allow for allowance for smaller trees than the 8-inch caliper that we currently have in the ordinance as labeled as protected trees, if there are insufficient trees of that size on site. And then furthermore, which this is one item that came out of review of the Planning and Zoning Board, is to allow for a 20-foot reduction in that calculation for one single driveway allowance. All right, further approach here on the left, you'll see a diagram where we've included in the ordinance now a label of the side street yard. And again, some of these diagrams are just meant to be informative. They're not perfect by any means, but you'll see there where the driveway is depicted from the, it's like a detached garage there. We would call that, we're imagining that be the front. Say there's the front, there's a driveway access, there's a front door there. Corner lot, there's a side street yard. So this one has a side street buffer yard, a front buffer yard, one side buffer yard, and then a rear buffer yard. So the number of required trees for each, we have drafted as 1 tree required per 15 linear feet of the front yard. Side street buffer yard, we require 1 per 15 linear feet as well. Side buffer yard is 1 tree per 35 linear feet, and the rear will be 1 per 25.
And you can see with those ratios, again, we've put the emphasis along the street frontage to maintain that street line character. The other thing you get with having a buffer, like a more intense buffer along the front, is a lot of that activity you get is along that street frontage. So you got people, you got pedestrians, you got cars, you got all those things that are using the right of way. So naturally, we thought we'd have a more intense buffer along that front street area.
All right, so, we got our development standard in place, we've got our objective criteria, and we thought, really the goal could be to incentivize the retention of it should be healthy existing mature vegetation. So this ordinance does allow for an applicant to receive credit for the required number of plantings for any existing trees that are 8 inches or greater diameter breast height, which is defined as a protected tree. And further, we'll give you additional tree credits for trees that are greater than 16 inches diameter breast height at a rate for 1 tree for every 4 inches after 16 inches. So if you've got a 20-inch caliper tree on your property, you could get credit for meeting the requirement of 3 trees. And as I did mention, we can also allow, if there are no trees, no protected trees at that 8-inch diameter there on the site, getting credit for a 4-inch caliper or a 5-inch caliper or a 6-inch caliper is still better than potentially having to plant one at a minimum of 2-inch caliper. So we do have some modifications or allowances built in to the draft. All right, our good colleague Kevin Brewer here, he performed a couple of these diagrams that also kind of paint a picture and have a nice visual. He sent out some correspondence on this to us all earlier today, and so we were able to reflect that in Darren's lovely PowerPoint that we worked on this afternoon. So here, Kevin took some base measurements. He kind of based this on what we've kind of quote unquote looked at as our typical lot size, typical lot dimensions. Of course, this isn't always going to be a case, but this is just meant to be for illustrative purposes only. He actually put the required number of plantings in the front, side, and rear yard, and he put them side by side with another development. So if new development were coming in, 2 lots side by side, this is an example of what the outcome could be, either in plantings or really with the retention, if at all possible, of any existing mature vegetation there on the lot. So you can kind of get to see how there can be grouping, there can be spacing, it can be left up to the applicant or the applicant's design team to really craft and design the lot how they want to and the landscaping around it, but it's still able to provide some sort of a buffer. And again, this is just an aerial 2-dimensional view. We have a couple more in the next couple slides that can kind of, this one shows the depiction from the street view, and you can kind of see how the emphasis there is along the front and the street, and the way the grouping is managed there, and with the driveway credits, it still doesn't visually totally obscure the view of the house from the street. There was some conversation with council a couple weeks ago about not wanting to negatively impact someone who wants to have their house seen from the street. So, we still think we can provide that opportunity as well. Here's sort of like a bird's eye. Again, it just kind of gives you another view, another angle of what something could potentially play out looking like if this ordinance were approved. And then another. We appreciate Kevin taking the time on that.
Yeah, Kevin did a great job with this. And again, you can see the emphasis on the front. You can see where it gets off on the side. You can see that side ratios, and then it picks back up again on the rear.
All right. Well, one challenge that we did try, and we can come up with all this other criteria, is really, as Darren said earlier, the well over the majority of the lots in the village are existing developed lots. They went through some sort of development review and approval at some point. So how do we handle existing developed lots and not be too onerous in any of our requirements? So what we have proposed is if you have existing developed lots, if you have your single family lot, you and your family live there, it was approved, 8, 10 years ago, 3 years ago. It was approved yesterday and you moved into it. All right, we're going to just carry over the current landscaping requirements that we have in place now, as long as if you're proposing any development that will not exceed 50% of the principal building floor area, which is a sizable addition. Then if you do cross that 50% threshold of redevelopment, or if you demolished a lot, you start over, then you're going to have to come into compliance with the proposed new regulations. So again, we're giving an out for all the existing developed lots. You just got to meet the current standard, which, as you see, varies from 4 required trees to 8, and then to 16, all at a minimum of 3-inch DBH. And again, they can be placed anywhere on site. However, if you're doing a grand addition that's greater than 50% of the floor area of the current home, then you're going to have to come into compliance with the new standards that are as drafted. And again, most of our established neighborhoods are heavily vegetated. Another big important item that this ordinance as drafted does address is clearing and grading. One thing that we would hear time and time again as developments were coming through for review, and just a lot of public comment were on just completely clearing a lot, and especially if there were no active permit, no development permit had yet to been approved. So this proposed ordinance does create a new section early on in section 951 that addresses clearing and grading of vacant parcels. So it sets forth that a clearing and grading permit will be required specifically when you have no active application for a development permit as required by the PDO, i.e. a major or minor subdivision, major or minor site plan, or single family development site plan. So the requirements with the clearing and grading permit with the application are provided include a tree survey, show the proposed construction entrance, and show how these required standings to meet these buffer yard requirements at the 1 per 15 in the front or side street yard, the 1 per 35 for the side yards, and 1 per 25 for the rear yards, either with new plantings or if you're showing you're going to get credit by keeping some existing trees on the lot. Administrative modifications, we know this got a lot of discussion a couple of weeks ago. We tried to play out every possible scenario until our heads hurt even more than they have already. And I'm sure we may not have come up with every solution, but we feel we've given a lot of allowances here. We will allow administrative modifications, especially if you're satisfying the tree preservation credits. In other words, you're getting credit for meeting the landscaping requirements by preserving the vegetation on site. And we will allow you to go even further outside of that quote unquote buffer yard if you are within a distance no greater than that required yard depth. So if you have a 25-yard setback and you don't have enough existing vegetation to give yourself credit within that 25 feet, then if there's something 5, 10, 15, up to 25 feet into the building envelope that would meet the criteria to gain preservation credit, meeting that requirement, we can allow for that, especially if there are insufficient trees there on site. Also, we allow for small trees to avoid conflicts with overhead infrastructure. Example I know is largely used are dogwoods, and we allow, you'll see that in the planting table in section 914.6 of this proposal, which will say, we allow them to be short and only a minimum caliper of 1.5 inches, I believe. And then again, as I previously discussed, we'll also could allow for credit for trees that are smaller than 8 inches DBH if you can justify that there are insufficient number of trees of that size caliper on site.
Now kind of back to the comprehensive plan, and what we're heading to is staff recommendation, council action, and what you're going to start to see is if council moves forward with it, and part of it's going to be asking to approve a statement of consistency with the comprehensive plan. Specifically, we'll have on page 124 under guiding principle number 3, places to live, for protect and enhance existing neighborhoods, improve neighborhood appearance, implementation strategy 3.1. states the village should periodically evaluate standards for landscape design and planting and amend standards as necessary to meet the needs and desires of the village. Again, we've explained that we feel that we've met that goal with the proposal that's been brought forward to you. So we feel that we're in line with that. And then if you go on page number 2 of 3 under guiding principle number 7, all things green, parks, open spaces and natural resources for protecting Pinehurst natural resources, preserve trees, states the urban forest is an important aesthetic, economic, and environmental asset to Pinehurst. It contributes positively to the character of the village, the health of the environment, the quality of life of residents, and the experience of visitors. Implementation strategy 7.6 further suggests the village to enhance the tree preservation program and standards for tree planting and preservation in the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. Again, we feel that the proposal that is being brought forward is consistent with those goals. Council action tonight is council is conducting a public hearing to receive public comment, review the material along with staff and planning and zoning board recommendations. After holding the public hearing, the council may adopt the proposed amendment by ordinance. Again, because we're doing it virtually, there has to be a minimum of 24 hours. Reject the proposed amendment, refer the proposed amendment back to the planning and zoning board or committee of the village council for further consideration, or we can continue the public hearing to another time and date certain. With this being with this particular hearing being defined as a remote meeting, council must allow for a minimum of 24 hours public comment period. Members of the public can provide their comments to the clerk at publiccomments@vopnc.org. The Planning and Zoning Board recommendation, at its February meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board recommended approval of the ordinance and adopted a statement of consistency with the 2019 comprehensive plan that was part of the Novus package. The staff recommendation, staff recommends that the village council find the proposed, and again, we're probably getting a little ahead of ourselves because you're not in deliberation. We're kind of foreshadowing when you actually have that deliberation, what currently the staff recommendation is going to be, because right now you're going to, after this, we'll have a public hearing and it'll be closed. But staff recommends that village council find the proposed amendment reasonable and consistent with the 2019 comprehensive plan as reflected in attachment A, and approve PDL text amendments to section 9.5, 9.14, and 10.2 as proposed. And then we have a specific recommendation, and we've talked about that in the staff memo. We were proposing that you adopt alternate language to the trees removed in violation. The trees removed in violation, we are recommending simply that any trees that are removed in violation, those replacement trees shall be planted according to section table 9.5.14, which is simply the current proposed landscaping schedule. The other, things like double permit fees, other penalties can apply, but our intent here is to get the trees planted as proposed by the ordinance from a compliance standpoint. And with that, that really is the end of Alex and I's show. So we will stop that now and turn that back over to you, John.
Darren, thanks very much. That will conclude then the staff report for this public hearing number 1. During the course of the last several minutes, a number of people have come into Assembly Hall. And just by a show of hands, I'd like to know how many of you are here to make a comment, if at all, on the public hearing that we're presently engaged in having to do with a buffering and tree ordinance for the village of Pinehurst. If you're here for that purpose and wish to speak about that, would you raise your hand? All right. So I'm assuming that all of you who've come in just in the last 10 minutes or so are here for other business or to observe the meeting. Is that correct? Fine. All right. What I'm going to do is we have at least 3 people here to speak about in the public hearing about this ordinance, and they've already signed up and they're in the room. I have several messages that have come to the village today, which I will read after the people who are here in the hall have had a chance to speak. And then we will, as a council, ask any questions that we further may have from staff, and discuss whether we wish to vote on this ordinance tonight or to postpone it till another week or to our next meeting. Jeff, I think that's the best guidance I can give. Jeff Sanborn, I think you concur with that?
Yeah, absolutely, John. Just one minor correction. You cannot vote on it tonight.
I'm sorry, yes, I meant to say that. We can't actually vote on the item tonight because we're meeting in virtual mode under state regulations adopted some months ago. When we're operating in virtual mode, we need to wait at least 24 hours. So the earliest that we would vote on this, if we do it all, it would be in 24 hours from now, and the council will discuss that in a few minutes. So I'm going to move to those of you who are here who wish to speak on this ordinance. And the first person who signed up is Mr. John Hoffman. You may use the table in the front of the room here to, at the microphone, please, to make whatever comments you wish. Mr. Bart O'Connor has signed up, and also Mr. Leo Santawaso, in that order.
We having an audio problem?
No, we're just waiting for John. John, you can speak either from the podium or the table, whichever you prefer. They're all ready for your, either way you want. Yep, that's available to all speakers tonight, both these options. And our technology people let us know if we can't hear you right. And John, as you know, please either hold the microphone or speak directly into it. And thank you very much. Go right ahead.
Have to be sworn in?
No, I don't
No,
believe, no,
okay.
not tonight.
Mayor Strickland, members of the Village Council, ladies and gentlemen, either actual or virtual. I strongly support this effort to examine and strengthen the appropriate sections of Chapter 9 and 10 of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance to address tree preservation and landscaping standards in the village of Pinehurst. In my opinion, previous administrations allowed and in some cases supported dubious projects. For example, the barracks or Walker Station, to name a few, which were inappropriate, all in support of so-called progress. The village staff made a strong presentation at the Planning and Zoning Board hearing using slides to show earlier original streetscapes around Old Town and then compared them with new construction on Medlin Road, which demonstrated the total lack of landscaping standards in force now. Unfortunately, unscrupulous builders and developers are not solely to blame for this situation. This village itself must share some of the blame. On Magnolia Road, opposite the Magnolia Inn, there is a sign which states as follows, and I quote, "Old Town Paths. Restored in 2006, the pathway extending down this block of Magnolia Road reflects America's preeminent landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted's original vision of paths for a village in the trees. His plan consisted of a network of paths using the local natural materials of sand and clay to blend in with the environment," unquote. Imagine that, an early environmentalist laying out the pathways for early Old Town Pinehurst. My wife and I moved to Pinehurst in September 1991, drawn here by the ambiance of Old Town. At that time, a sand clay pathway ran along Everett Road in front of my home, which was maintained periodically by the village. I'm sure that Mayor Strickland and Council Member Kevin Drum, longtime residents of Old Town Pinehurst, remember these sand clay pathways better than I do. In fact, early editions of the PDO described in detail the layout of the village right-of-way or streetscape in Old Town. Alternating magnolia or holly trees, located in a swale, with bushes interspersed between them, protecting the sand clay pathway from the street. The neighborhood surrounding Pinehurst Elementary School, bounded by Short, Page, Fields, and Dundee roads, still retain vestiges of this sand clay network to this day. During the before-mentioned Planning and Zoning Board meeting, it was stated that the National Park Service would be conducting an audit to determine our historic district status. Contrary to some, I consider this historic district status to be essential to the well-being of Old Town Pinehurst. Otherwise, it is just anywhere USA. What better way to help maintain this historic district status than by refurbishing these historic sand clay pathways in this neighborhood surrounding Pinehurst Elementary? There is a prior history of our neighborhood working in tandem with the village to solve a right-of-way problem. Approximately 15 years ago, there arose an acute traffic problem on Kelly Road when dropping off or picking up children at Pinehurst Elementary. A group was formed called the Neighbors, who approached Andy Wilkinson, the village manager, with a plan to replant the bushes between the existing trees on the school side of Kelly between Everett and Dundee roads. This was accomplished, and the village restored the sand clay path from Page Road to Dundee Road, providing a safe, secure walkway for these children and or their parents. The Neighbors have maintained these bushes ever since. In closing, I ask Mayor Strickland, the members of the Village Council, and the audience, either actual or virtual, to drive down Kelly Road from Dundee to Everett Road and see for yourselves the damage that has been done to this streetscape by construction and or power crews during the development of the new enlarged Pinehurst Elementary School. This neighborhood may be obliged to put up with 2 years or so of construction, traffic, and noise, and untold years of traffic congestion on our quiet residential streets. But we should not be obliged to live with this streetscape nightmare, especially being an integral part of Old Town and the Pinehurst Historic District. Please use this opportunity to develop a streetscape renewal program for this neighborhood as a partial argument for a continued Pinehurst Historic District. Thank you.
Mr. Altman, thank you very much. If you would like to submit those comments to the village clerk, that would be fine, either today or in the near future. And as I'm calling Mr. O'Connor, who is the next speaker, we just make note that we've had several people come into the room over the past 10 or 15 minutes. We have masks in the back of the room. I would ask you to each find one of those and wear it, please, or use one you may have personally brought. We're operating under guidelines established by the Governor of North Carolina, and in this space, we would ask you to please wear your masks. My mask will be on and off during consultation here with our speakers, but the masks are in the back of the room, and I would ask you to please wear them. Bart, I appreciate your being here tonight, and thank you for submitting some questions earlier about the ordinance. And I know you've had a chance to talk to the staff a little bit about this, but please take us through the comments that you have tonight. Appreciate your input very much.
My name is Bart O'Connor. I live on Donald Ross Drive. For those who don't know me, I'm a 25-year resident of Pinehurst. Have spent a lot of time with the village over those years, including 15 years on the Conservation Commission, and on the beautification committee, an original member, John, of both. I am, by definition, a landscape designer. I have designed well over 1,000 properties here in Pinehurst since we've arrived. And with that background, I'd like to get underway. Incidentally, in addition to a lot of residential properties that I've designed, it's been a lot of fun over the years working with Public Works, with Walt Morgan and his group, designing public landscapes all around Pinehurst, including the 4 on the west side of Route 5 from 211 to the overpass. So with that background, I have read the ordinance, and I do have some questions. And I might start by saying I totally agree with the objectives, totally. I met yesterday with Alex Cameron to review these questions. Council members, you all have a copy. And yesterday's 1-hour session with Alex was very productive, and it will permit me to move along with a lot of speed here tonight. So with that background, I will read to you with some comments the questions that I've raised. The first, academically, what changes are being made? Well, anything that was underlined in this 21-page report, those are the changes. Why are some lined out? Obviously, to eliminate them. Third question, one of the mandates is an 8-inch or larger diameter oak are classified as protected. Members of the council, I don't know anybody in Pinehurst that thinks a scrub oak should be protected. Alex offered one possibility, maybe that trunk size should be increased to 12 inches. I go along with a pin oak as being protected, but not scrubs. Number 4, some language throughout the ordinance is, by my standard, unnecessarily complicated. Let me give you one example. It's on page 2. It's about a frontage of a property. I'm going to read it to you. The front yard is equal to the depth of the front yard setback of the zoning district extended to the side property lines. Why couldn't it simply be the front yard is measured at the setback? I use that as one example, but I must say throughout the entire 21 pages, I get a lot of that. Question number 5. What is a flag lot yard? I've been here 25 years, never heard that definition. Alex clearly explained to me it's the one where you have a 10-foot entry till you get to it. God bless it, I just never understood or never knew it had a name. Number 6, what is the average cost of a tree survey for a residential property? Alex said that he talked to a surveyor, and he said, well, I'll charge $10 a tree. I have to share with you my experience with tree surveyors and landscape architects. They're not bashful about spending or charging a lot of money. I worry this could be an unnecessary financial burden on a homeowner, but that's just a personal comment. Number 7, the definition of tree removal includes, among many things, paving with concrete, asphalt, or other impervious materials within the drip line. Well, I come to find out I totally misunderstood that question, As Alex pointed out, all that is saying in vernacular terms, if a developer abuses the ground around a tree to cause it to die, it has to be replaced. I have no problem with that. Number 8, and this may be a personal question, why is a landscape designer omitted from the group preparing a tree survey? I refer you to page 5. Alex points out that was not an intentional definition. I am, by definition, a professional. I'm a landscape designer, fully capable of preparing a tree survey. So Alex suggested to me that that was not intentional. Perhaps the language might simply be a professional. Working our way down, John. Number 9, why is only one driveway allowance permitted? We have lots of properties with circular driveways. So I really think that should be addressed and treated the same way that you're correctly treating one driveway. Number 10, and this one gets controversial. Number 10, the provision to plant trees 15 feet apart at the front of a residential property can hinder an attractive landscape presentation. I don't understand why that's mandated. Alex and I had a healthy conversation. I do understand the objective. I might parenthetically add, it's a lot easier, John, for me to criticize than to write an audience. Believe me, I understand that. But I must tell you, to plant 15 feet apart in the front of a property not only hinders my ability to design, I'm just not quite sure that's attractive. I think that might be better addressed by saying how many trees you might want. That's a legitimate request. Don't tell the designer or the homeowner where it has to be and how far apart. That's my comment on that. Number 11, and this is addressed on page 6. Why is there a mandate to plant trees at specific interviews at side and rear sections of property if adjoining properties are fenced with tree shrubs? Alex said he might reconsider that one. For example, and we have very few open lots left, John. Perhaps what, 1,600, 1,800 lots? Is it not possible, or I would suggest it is possible, that a lot that's being developed might have neighbors who have tree lines on their property? Why would we have to add trees adjacent to that? The objective, again, terrific. But I don't think we have to mandate spacing, number of trees on the sides and on the rear in addition to the front. Number 12, and this is a sensitive one for me. The ordinance calls for a 3-inch diameter pine. Well, Alex very quickly yesterday corrected me to say, now you understand that's only for commercial. I will tell you, Bruce Gould and I went around the horn many times, and on many projects forced me to design with a 3-inch. I will share with you, 33% to 50% of a 3-inch pine will die. It is simply too big. Well, Alex quickly pointed out to me that on page 20, there was a clarification. It calls for a 2-inch pine. That's fine. Number 13, why are berms limited to 2 horizontal versus 1 vertical. I don't see why that has to be so defined. Alex pointed out that there's a lot of logic on commercial work. I can buy into that. When it comes to residential properties, I've been designing berms for 25 years for beauty, to enhance property. I don't think we should be told how many and what the dimension is. So I'll share that as I think a legitimate criticism. Number 14, size of shrubs are mandated as follows. A minimum of 24 inches in height that can be reached to 4 to 5 feet in height and 3 inches in width. Alex points out that this is really targeted for parking areas. For residential, I'd like to recommend that you adopt the Pine Wild model. That simply says 5-gallon shrubs on the foundations. And after that, you're on your own what size. I think that's a much better, more realistic, and cheaper plan for the average residential property. Number 15, and this is getting into a personal thing, instructions pages 13 through 19 are truly laborious. And there's a lot of repetitive data in there. I would love to see a lot of that simply cut out or shortened. Number 16, what is the rationale for the following mandate? Quote, this is on page 13. Tree planting areas shall be located such that no parking space is further than 75 feet from a tree trunk. First of all, understanding that is tough. Alex points out this is really directed at commercial, not residential. I don't think it's needed. Why? I don't know why we can't eliminate it. Number 17 and next to last. This is on page 20. It is mandated that at least 1/2 of planted trees shall be longleaf pines. I like longleaf pines, but I also love other trees. I really don't think we should be told how many longleafs we should plant. I really think that should be an option for the designer, and it should be a question for the homeowner, what kind of, John, we have lovely, lovely trees. Drive by my home, and I have dozens that are not longleafs. My backyard is overwhelmed with them. I also question whether or not that might be legal for the town to tell you what kind of tree you can plant. My last question, number 18. In 20 pages of regulations, no mention is made, nor any recognition given to the problem of newly planted trees and shrubs that die. So my question is why? I can only guess, but the village has neither the money or the personnel, the time to follow up. But let me share and end with a painful example of why this is important. 4 years ago around this time, I designed and we installed a landscape for the new parking lot on Dundee for Sacred Heart Church. I put in 28 new pines because that property was dominated with pines. And that was the request from the village. Because I was putting in 3-inch pines, and I put in 28 of them, 12 died. That's about an average number to die if you're putting in a 3-inch caliber tree. Here's the painful end of that story. We had a new pastor arriving at that time, and just as we were getting ready to replace the 12 trees, we had them dug at the nursery. The pastor said, you know, let's hold off on that. I might want to put those in a different location. The end of the sad story, they never got replanted. So with that beautiful design, I hold my eyes when I drive by because it's missing 12 planted pines in a specific area. So with that, I'll wrap it up. I want to reiterate, I love the objectives. I feel it can be accomplished with less verbiage, less direction, less expensively. And, you know, this is in my lane. I had difficulty understanding an awful lot of it, an awful lot. Perhaps if this had been written for commercial ABCD, for residential ABCD, I think it might have had a greater clarity, easier to read. And I will end by saying, I want to repeat, it's a lot easier to criticize. It's a lot tougher to write ordinances. And I know the fine people that have put this together, their motives are terrific. So with that, I'll sum it up. Thank you, John.
Mr. O'Connor, thank you very much. And again, thank you for two things, your service to the village of Pinehurst over many years in this area of landscape design and with some of our committees, and for submitting the questions in advance so we'd have those. And I'm sure the council will consider those. I know you've had a chance, as you said, to speak with Alex and other people in the department about that. Our next speaker in the room on this subject is Leo Santawaso. And as he's coming to the table there, I'll again remind our guests in the room that we are operating under COVID restrictions. I would ask you please to wear a mask for the benefit of all the rest of us in the room, and I hope you'll act on that accordingly. Mr. Santawaso, welcome back. I'll introduce you as the immediate past chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board of the Village of Pinehurst, and we welcome you and your comments on this hearing tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. Again, as a former member of Planning and Zoning and chair, this is a subject near and dear to me. I guess Darren considered it to be my baby when he first started his tour as Planning Inspection Director. I'd like to present some brief history associated with this proposal for council's information, if you will, and for the benefit of those in attendance today. This is not an entirely new ordinance. This is an amendment to an existing ordinance. 2 or 3 sections of an existing ordinance is being amended to accommodate the preservation of trees. Back in January of 2018, a meeting was called, attended by Jeff Sanborn, Natalie Hawkins, Mike Newman, myself, and Bruce Gould. Natalie was sitting in, assuming the position as the Planning and Inspections Director, since we were in the process of finding a new one. And Bruce was the senior planner of Planning and Zoning Board at the time, who left the employ of the village several days thereafter. At any rate, in the past, development happened in Pinehurst, most recently, I would say, with development like Walker Station, that completely removed, or almost completely removed, all the vegetation on site. And the term clear cutting was used. And the meeting was called necessarily to try to do something about it. And we did not want to completely rewrite an ordinance. We needed to fill in some blanks and add some new material to affect the manner in which trees were removed from residential properties, major subdivisions, infill lots. So to that extent, a seed was planted. The pun is intended. And the village charged planning and zoning to come up with an ordinance amendment to address the issue. Well, P&Z formed a subcommittee. It went to work, and I was part of that subcommittee. We didn't get too far down the road before Senator McGinnis, our representative at the time in the state Senate, proposed a bill that would eliminate local government's ability to address this kind of issue, which in my opinion is a further reduction of the home rule, and in my opinion, again, putting the state in the position as the judge and jury of how a local government can control its destiny. The subcommittee work came to an end because of that proposed bill. No one wanted to tweak the sleeping bear, so to speak, even though the proposed bill was never passed as law. I still understand it may be smoldering in the back rooms somewhere up there in Raleigh. Anyway, after the adoption of the 2019 Comprehensive Long-Range Plan, and with the advent of a new planning director, Darren Barrett, the subcommittees really started to dig into this, and we continued to work on what came to be known as the Tree Preservation Amendment to the PDO. And that is exactly what the proposed amendment is all about, preserving trees. I'd like to think envisioned by Olmsted and Manning back in the day. By requiring areas identified by lot lines and setback lines to keep existing vegetation for buffering and screening purposes, the intent on providing tree canopy along frontage of streets and to provide a buffering and screening requirement goes a long way to what gives the village its ambiance and charm. And the regulation will also help to protect existing trees and to enhance the tree canopy along the streets, not to mention provide habitat for indigenous insects, animals, birds, and things of that nature, which is all part and parcel of the quality of life in the village. The effort to put together this kind of an amendment was an extremely long process. It started in the fall of 2018 and hopefully ends very soon. A great deal of research and study, thanks to Kathy Lyles, consultant with the P&Z staff. We visited regulations from other communities such as Hilton Head, Charleston, Aberdeen, and our peer group and others that were really picked apart, and the good items were brought into the work that we were doing. The bad items we discarded after much discussion and back and forth between everyone involved in working on the amendment. What you have in front of you, in my opinion, is a well thought out and very workable system that will go a long way to help preserve our trees and our ambience and charm. It is something new, so most likely will need to be amended from time to time. Because of the newness, there must be the ability for the administrative authority to make adjustments on a case-by-case basis where certain site-specific conditions require change, but still retain the intent and purpose of the regulation. And I might use Bart's comment about a second driveway as an example. Where a condition exists where such a driveway is necessary and can be fit into the general scheme of the requirement, the local administrator should have the ability to make that change without having to go back through the whole rigmarole again. The amendment I believe is consistent with several guiding principles of the 2019 Comprehensive Long-Range Plan. The charge that was given to Planning and Zoning back in 2018, I think, has been completed. Planning and Zoning and staff have recommended adoption, and I also strongly urge Council to adopt Ordinance 21-06. And finally, last but not least, I want to thank Darren, Alex, Kathy, Kelly, all the folks at Planning and Inspections, Jeff Sanborn, Natalie Hawkins, for all the help that they gave this subcommittee in all the work that I hope makes this amendment come to fruition. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Mr. Sanwaso, thank you very much. Very nice to see you back here, and we appreciate your long work on this project and helping with the development of it over time. In addition to the three individuals here, and only the three, as I understand it, who are here to speak about speak to the public hearing, we have several comments been made by electronic mail. And I'm going to read, or in a couple cases paraphrase these for benefit of the village council and the public. And after that point, we'll recess the hearing and have any further discussion that the council wishes to have tonight. More coming in the door right now. Okay. I think I have this one. As I begin to read these, once again, I'll remind everybody that we ask you to wear a mask here. That is the state law and requirement at this time. And I would ask you to consider that not only at my request, but for the safety of others in this room. If you wish to speak to the meeting tonight, you may do so at the end of the meeting, which will be a little ways off, and sometime after the public hearing. The first written comment we have tonight is from Mr. Larry Johnson, addressing the tree ordinance. I was recently informed about the upcoming vote on the new tree ordinance that would create a fee from the village if the homeowner has a tree removed. I understand the concern to keep the look of Pinehurst intact. However, with that said, This seems to be just a way to generate more revenue. First, the trees are part of the property which the homeowner owns and are not owned by the village. So for the village to charge the homeowner a fee to remove something that belongs to the homeowner seems unfair. Second, and more importantly, more homeowners have a tree removed either when the tree is not healthy or is a threat to the property or life. It will be the homeowner who has to bear the responsibility of the damage that a fallen tree causes. I do not see the village standing up to take that role. And lastly, I will be following to see which members of the village council vote yes on this ordinance. It will help make my decision on how to cast my vote in the next election. I would encourage all other residents of Pinehurst to feel the same way, to go to the polls the next time. Larry Johnson. I think as I read through these and we get them into the public record, we may make an attempt to, not tonight, but to respond to some of these where there may be an error in understanding of what the ordinance actually says and does, so that we can dismiss any uncertainty in the public arena. The next comment is from Alan Ashdown. Alan says simply, I propose a definite no to this proposal. Mr. Alan Ashdown. The third comment is from Paula Nash. And this is an official comment from the Moore County Home Builders Association, for which Paula Nash is the executive director. The letter reads, we appreciate our working relationship with the current staff and the village council. We have met and discussed the proposed ordinance at length. Alex and Darren have been very helpful fostering a better relationship with our association. We would like to request that the ordinance be placed on hold to allow the Village of Pinehurst staff to work with our association to come up with a solution that will prevent broad stroke clear cutting of lots, mainly by large developments, and not place the burden on our builders developing single lots. We understand that most of the issues come from major subdivisions, and those are few and far between in our Pinehurst area. The single lot development will suffer the most when we do not feel this is the intent of the ordinance. We stand with staff on saving trees and preserving the appearance of Pinehurst. We request the Village Council help us build our community by working together. Please table the ordinance and let's find a way to accomplish the end goal without punishing the innocent builders that work hard to preserve our Pinehurst image. Again, we thank Alex Cameron and Jeremy Hooper for their willingness to foster a beneficial partnership with our association and its members. Signed again by Paula Nash, Executive Director, Moore County Home Builders Association. The next message is somewhat lengthy, and I will paraphrase that to some degree. It's from Mr. Bob Van Houten. Bob himself, a former president, I believe, of the Moore County Home Builders Association. Paraphrasing and going over his key points, the bottom line, Bob Houghton says, is, I do believe as a builder we should do our best to preserve trees and the aesthetics of Pinehurst and surrounding area where we can. But I see few reasons for a clear-cut lot. I see few reasons for a clear-cut lot outside of a lot that just had blackjack oaks on it. If that is the case, then the owner should not be penalized for what Mother Nature gave them by having to plant thousands of dollars worth of new trees. Here are my major concerns. I tried to read through the new regulations and found them at best confusing and cumbersome. There are also areas that if you follow the new regs, they will create issues in other areas of the job site. Point 2, if the main concerns are for a new potential of development in your ETJ, then I believe that can be addressed and should be addressed directly with regulations that would not affect single lots or remodels. Point 3, a blanket ordinance which is proposed is not very difficult to understand, but I believe will also lead to such difficulty enforcing, which computes to more labor and costs for the town. Point 4, if you do not remove enough of the proper trees on the front end of a project, you will not be able to grade the job site correctly to control current and future erosion, which is a big concern. Point number 5, another concern I would have for our consumer, my customer, and your taxpayer is what this is going to cost them. Again, that's from Bob Van Houten, former member and maybe, I think, president of the Moore County Home Builders. The next message is from Mr. Denzel Williams, and I'll paraphrase some of this as well. As a transplanted Midwesterner, no one respects the value of trees, quote, in the right place, more than I. But I have a problem seeing how a tree ordinance fits into the powers granted by the municipality charter, which in the simplest form empowers the municipality to provide for the health and safety of its citizens while providing the necessary services. Point number 2, this ordinance, as proposed, is anything but a minor change to the existing landscape guidelines, given its 15 or so pages. Point number 3, it's one size fits all, whether it's new development or passed over single family across all zoning sizes. Point 4, this could interfere with safe and sound construction practices. Engineers don't suggest large trees any closer than 15 feet to the foundation, especially pines with their root system, which can cause damage to the foundation. Point number 5, this does not address the issue of drainage. Even trees in the right-of-way can and do pose an obstacle to good drainage. Point number 6, it's lengthy. I think that summarizes Mr. Haven's letter. Denzel Williams' letter. I think we had the same thing, a second copy of that, so I already have done Mr. Williams. Those are the comments written for tonight, Jeff, and along with the comments of our 3 visitors tonight. We'll circulate those to the council and reflect on the information that's contained therein. Now we're back to the council. Does the council have any further questions of staff at this point in time with respect to this hearing, and to get that into the record? Otherwise, we'll terminate the hearing and re-enter the regular meeting to discuss the way forward on this ordinance. Any questions from staff, from council members to the staff at this point? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn the public? I'm sorry, Jane?
Your audio's off. Audio's off, Jen.
Got it. Sorry. I had a question if it would be possible.
Jane, as you're doing that, could you maybe get a little closer to your microphone, or we'll increase the volume here in Village Hall? You're just a little light. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't think that's the button she intended to push.
Well, that went well. Okay.
Don't worry,
Senator-
Judy was with you on that screen there for a minute. Thank you. Go ahead,
All right,
Jane.
well, for my next trick, okay. I had a question on the table on 9.14.6, which is on page 20, and it talks about the spacing of trees. So if you need one tree every 15 feet, why are you spacing them 7.5 feet apart? Does that mean that you've got twice as many trees as you thought you did? Or am I reading it wrong?
When you look at a tree being spaced on.
Hold on. This is, there, never mind.
Are we good? Okay, you got us. Okay, when you look at a tree each tree being on 7.5 foot centers, it means each tree gets 7.5 feet on either side. So if you look at that, that equals 15 feet between the 2 trees. So it's just another way of saying, in more typical landscape architect terms, that it's one tree on a 15-foot center.
All right, I believe you. Okay. Sort of. And then
I would make one other comment, if I could. I would say it probably won't hurt if you want to delete that column and just stick with the 15-foot language. We would be good doing that as well. I think it gets the point across either way.
Okay, thank you. And then my other comment, and I don't know if this is the time to bring it up. But there are some neighborhoods in Pinehurst, and Pine Wild is one, that have private covenants. There are private streets and they have private covenants that have to do with landscaping. And in Pine Wild, the private covenants say you're supposed to keep a lot of trees on your lot and so forth. And it's a very active tree preservation model. But the spacing of the trees is quite different. They actually don't want you to have trees placed that look like they're on the property line, creating almost a fence type of situation between the different lots, because they want it to look like one big park-like setting. And also they want to preserve the views of, there's a lake here, they preserve waterfront views and preserve golf views of the golf courses that go through here. So there are actually easements on the different lots where you're not allowed to put a bunch of trees because it would block your neighbor's view. And so is it possible to add authority on the part of the village planner to do another type of modification where you have a private street and a private homeowners association with covenants, that as long as you've got the sufficient number of trees overall that the village wants you to have, that a modification could be made by the village planner with respect to the grouping, so that the homeowner doesn't get caught in the whipsaw between the requirements of the homeowners association and the requirements of the village as to the layout and location.
Jane, I don't think we've got that question and we've been considering it. We haven't figured out how to best address that. We were just talking about that amongst ourselves, and maybe the appropriate mechanism to do something like that is through the subdivision regs. And if you're coming through the subdivision process where you do something like that, where you'd have, common lots that are, not going to be developable lots, but you're trying to preserve some type of easement. We haven't really, I think that's probably the best way to do it. I don't think, nothing springs to mind with respect to adjusting the ordinance to allow for something like that.
Hey, Darren, may I add something? I had several communications with our property manager today out in Pinewell, and she raised some other administrative concerns. And I don't want to go into them now, but I'm happy to forward those to you so you guys can give it some thought.
That'd be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
Kathy?
The problem with the subdivision approach is that, of course, Pinewell is all subdivided, so is CCNC, for example, and all these other ones. And there aren't that many undeveloped lots left here. But if anybody were to, in future years, 10 years or 20 years or so forth, to replace a home, that cycle might start. So I don't know that the brand new subdivision is helpful for these existing neighborhoods.
So is there any guidance on that with those covenants, Jane, that says they have to be, or they can't be at the property line, but do they have to be, at least XYZ feet off? If we can try to play out some scenarios, if of some lots, even we can take a look at it and try to plug and play these requirements with those and see if we're going to run afoul.
I can get you a copy of the
ARB policies
regulations, that we have, so that you can see how they work.
And I'm thinking through those. Most of those lots are fairly large in size. They're all R30, so they're going to have pretty big setbacks. So you're going to have, I think a 40-foot front setback. I'm trying to think of what the side setback is, and then the golf course setbacks are going to be even further. So there's probably going to be an allowance to where our ordinance won't run afoul of those CNRs. You'll have ample opportunity for grouping, spacing, and more area. But it's definitely something we definitely don't want to pass something that's going to, just make a rub there. So we'll take a look at it.
Thank you, I do appreciate it, and I'll get you a copy of the
Policies
of
and
the
procedures.
regulations, yeah, the covenants.
Are there any other questions from the council to members of staff?
Just John,
Kevin?
is this the time that we correct some misinterpretations from the public or after it's closed?
I think we do that after,
Okay,
after we adjourn the hearing. We can comment back to that.
okay.
So any other comments or questions for the staff then to get that into the record? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting for purpose of discussion of the ordinance?
I move to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting.
The motion by Judy Davis, is there a second?
A second.
A second by Lydia Bosch. All in favor of adjourning the public hearing and re-entering the regular meeting, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, so we're back to the regular meeting for discussion of this ordinance and the way forward. I make a couple points to the council as we discuss this. We can make a decision 24 hours or later from now, if we choose to do that, and set a date to continue this meeting, or we can await the next meeting of the Village Council on March 23rd, I believe, to continue to discuss what we've heard tonight and any further feedback from the staff. That's just as a reminder as we enter into some discussion. But let's reflect on what we've heard. What comments from council do we have on this particular hearing tonight?
I was
Kevin?
thinking staff might be able to respond to some of those public comments, but be in better position than council. What do you think, John and Jeff?
That's fine. Jeff?
I might suggest that we kind of pause this conversation then and allow staff to go back and review what was said in the meeting and to review the written comments that were submitted via email and otherwise. And we can come back and re-engage the conversation at the next meeting or whenever you schedule to consider this topic further, with the opportunity to address some things that we think may have been misunderstandings about what the ordinance
Yeah.
requires.
Yeah, I think both at our previous discussions on this and certainly tonight, we've had, again, some very good public input. Some may not be correct, and I think we want to try to answer that and make sure that it's very clear in the public eye what the ordinance really contains and what the regulations would be. So Jeff is suggesting that we hold this over to our next meeting in 2 weeks, or to hold a special meeting between now and then after staff's had a chance to address some of the issues, all the issues, hopefully, that were raised tonight. While the council's thinking about that, I would ask the staff, Darren, Alex, Kathy, is there anything particular that you heard tonight that you think you'd like to clarify or expand upon? And if not, that's fine too.
All right. Well, since, as Mr. O'Connor mentioned, he and I had quite a bit of time yesterday to go through his 18 points. One thing I will say, a lot of the sort of the comments there in the middle really are regulations that we didn't take a look at. Those are the landscaping requirements that are already in place and apply to the commercial developed lots, like the berming, for example. The 3-inch caliper planning again. So I think a lot of that stuff is just stuff that we didn't analyze, we didn't look at. We're not part of the proposed change here. Obviously, a lot of it was educational for Bart and for myself to kind of hear some of his thoughts and him to hear where we kind of what our approach was. One of the things about the 15 feet apart, we did discuss there. The allowance for the grouping that staff can allow so that they're not 15 feet lined up like soldiers along the line. We can allow for grouping and spacing so long as there's not greater than 35 feet of space in between. So I just because I know I spent some time with Bart, I think aside from the tree survey concern he had, the look at the fencing with trees and shrubs, because comment number 11, we discussed that was more if it's an adjacent property, the development property doesn't have rights over the adjacent properties, either fencing or shrubbery they have there, so they could get removed. So I feel like we had a good meeting, and I feel like for the most part, I was able to answer most of his questions and concerns.
I think the other thing that we maybe add to address was that comment that we heard from, was Mr. Johnson about a fee for removing a tree. I'm not sure where that comment is coming from, because I don't know what the thought process is behind that, but we're certainly not proposing a fee to remove a tree.
It's exempt.
It's exempt in most of the cases, unless you actually are triggering a development permit. But for the vast majority of people with the tree, I'm not sure where that fee is, where that thought that we're having a fee is coming from.
That was my understanding too, Darren, so thank you for speaking to that point. Are there any then other comments from council to staff or anything else that you'd like to present or have further reviewed on this ordinance? Judy?
So, yeah, I have a couple of thoughts, and I'm so grateful for really good and strong and robust public input. I really appreciate Bart O'Connor's input especially, and all the other comments about simplifying the language. I think that's definitely something we should look at. I do have a question about that picture you all showed early on that might have been Medlin Road, where there were no trees. So a question I have, we have this desire and objective to have tree-lined streets. If we wanted to as the village, I assume that we could go in there and plant trees in our right-of-way. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you hear that, Darren? And I know Jeff heard it.
Great question, Judy.
Yeah. So I think that, that helps soften the neighborhoods as an activity that we can take. I mean, we can't go back and right every wrong in prior ordinances. But if there are some glaring areas where we think we could soften and have that neighborhood be a little bit more congruent with the objectives we have in terms of the tree canopies on our streets. And I also favor Mr. O'Connor's comment about the spacing of 15 feet is just, I think, way too tight and too many trees on there. I don't have 5 trees in front of my house, and I don't want them, So I think that we really need to look at that. I mean, I think it makes it easy. There's a calculus to your decision making, but I think that we've got to really look at that. And if you do plant trees in the right of way, I know heretofore there's not been any credit for that, but you're getting that ambiance that we want if you do have trees in the right of way. And I think that's something else we should look at.
Okay.
So, and then I think Jane's question is a good one about the conflicts between the HOA and the Pinehurst regs. And I'm sure there are a number of cases where we figure out which one trumps the other, but we need to figure that out as well. But again, appreciate all the terrific input and details that we got from so many people. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my comment would be kind of a newspaper comment. You kind of buried the lead a little bit. You buried the lead in the fact that this innovative idea of giving quadruple credit for a large tree. I think that, we're using a carrot more than a stick here. It's not, I think that's getting buried in this. And I think we almost should start with that. There's potential to never have to plant a tree by managing and using this credit program effectively. And I think that let's don't bury the lead here, because it's really an innovative idea that I'm really proud of the staff coming up with. I mean, what you could get like 4 credits for a tree? Am I hearing this correctly? I mean, for one tree. And so I don't, there's a lot of talk about having to do stuff. But let's talk about maybe you don't have to do stuff if you manage your lot properly. You might not have to do anything. And I just second what Judy says. I think it has to be simplified. I don't know how you do it, and I'm so sorry to even ask you because this is really tough what you're doing. But I think that we need to make it clear and somehow simplify the language between now and the next couple of weeks if possible. I have a concern about the people, the one gentleman that said that someone that's not blessed with a lot that has any vegetation on it or saving. And I think that is an interesting dilemma that I'm still struggling with. But I agree with Judy on the front facade being different. But I also agree it should have some trees in the front, but maybe not at the number indicated. So those are my comments, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone heard that, gosh, you can get, massive credit. We got 4 trees on 4 sides, and you can solve it if they're legacy trees and large trees. And I think that's real important and innovative, and I don't want that to go unnoticed.
Yeah, Kevin, I agree. I think that's a very innovative part of this overall plan, and as you say, the staff's to be congratulated on coming up with that good idea. Lydia, do you have any comments at this point?
I think I have a question. After listening to the public comment tonight and going through all of the materials, getting ready for the meeting, would it help staff if we share our thoughts with them? Let me back up and thank Darren and Alex and Kathy for working on this so hard for so long. And so I want to, I don't want to hurry them, but if it would help them to kind of go into the next phase of this, for us to provide our input, I'd like to do that.
Okay.
Darren, Alex.
Oh, no, we of course always welcome your input. So it would help, yes.
Okay, I heard some good things tonight. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to share with y'all if it'll help you, I'd like to share those.
We appreciate that. I think we see some, in going through it, and Alex and I and Kathy talking today and talking about the spacing thing, there's some opportunities to maybe adjust the spacing requirements so it's less rigid, which would give you more options. So, we're already thinking through some potential changes. We heard some other comments tonight. How much we can simplify it. We thought that we are at the simplistic route as it currently stands, and that's from a legalese standpoint with respect to the ordinance. We can take a look at it again. There's no way that we can simplify this entire ordinance within the next 2 weeks. I can tell you that. Okay. We can simplify maybe a couple sections or maybe a couple provisions, but the entire thing, that will be a couple month project. Just so you know.
Well, I'll get an email off to you tonight or tomorrow morning.
Maybe what I mean is like the section that was existing that maybe wasn't congruent with some of the new items. And maybe you can't simplify the document, but you could have a summary document that makes it easier to explain. Maybe that's the answer if you can't simplify the document.
Yeah, we can work it. We'll talk through that. We'll talk through it, Kevin, and the rest of the council. We'll try and figure something out.
Thank you.
We are resilient over here, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You've proven that.
Thank you, Darren. Jane, any further comments or questions or suggestions? Jane Hogan?
The only thing I want to say is that I tremendously admire the work that's gone into this. Not just the credit for additional size of tree trunk that gets you extra trees, which is an amazing idea, but the idea of protecting the perimeters and allowing property owners and developers flexibility to use the entire building envelope and so forth. And I think that when it takes a while to actually read through the document, but then one realizes that the bulk of the document is really our pre-existing commercial landscape ordinance, which has been there for these many years, since the Eisenhower administration, I believe. Isn't that right, Darren? And the only thing that's changing on that is the numbering. So, because we're putting the new stuff at the beginning. So that's the only reason that's even there. But I don't think it's as difficult, but you do have to sort of know the storyline before you start reading it. And then it falls into place. But anyway, it's a tremendous effort. So much about it is great. I think we might be able to polish it just a little bit and make it even better.
And I think I'd have more input if we didn't get such good input from the public. The input from the public was so good tonight that
Yeah, it was terrific.
it kind of took a lot of the comments that I had away because they've already said them. So I think when you combine all that input we got tonight, it was really good quality input, and we could take it and run with it.
John, can I add just to that? The other group that I'd really like to thank, and you had a former member tonight here for the public hearing, Mr. Santoasso. The Planning and Zoning Board has put a lot of effort into this as well. The reason that we think that this is a very good, well-crafted ordinance is based on a lot of the input. A lot of their input is in this document as well. So a lot of this credit goes to them as well. So I'd like to just give a thanks to them as well.
Very well said, Darren. We certainly want to recognize the work of our colleagues on the Planning and Zoning Board, not only those that are on the board now, but those who have been over the previous 2 or 3 years in the development of this recommended ordinance. Council, we have a decision to make then. Do we want to carry this discussion forward before our next regularly scheduled meeting and have a special meeting on this subject, or not? And I'm sort of hearing from the staff that the next meeting is probably the better plan for that. But is there council input? Maybe council, raise your hands. Does anybody want to have a meeting between now and our regular meeting on March 23rd with respect to this ordinance?
I want to give them the time.
Yeah, I would give staff the time they need, yeah.
Let's follow the lead of planning.
Fine. Then we don't need to have a continuance of the regular meeting. We'll just schedule it on the agenda for our next regular meeting on March 23rd. That really concludes then, and we're back in regular meeting, of course, the discussion on the public hearing. I'd like to move then to item number 6 on the, item number 7 on our agenda, which is a budget amendment for potential land acquisition. Jeff?
All right, thanks, John. Just to take everybody back, we had an entry in our 2021 budget for potential land purchase, and that was really intended when you put in the budget last summer to purchase land for a future fire station. And then as we progressed through the year, we saw an opportunity to buy a different piece of land for a different purpose, that being the parcel that adjoins our West Pinehurst Park property. You all approved us to use those funds to purchase that land. At the time, we didn't think it was likely that we were going to have the legitimate opportunity to go ahead with a purchase of land for our future fire station. So we didn't do a budget amendment to add that requirement back in. Now we know that we do have that opportunity, and so what Brooke is going to propose to you is a budget amendment that would again authorize funds that we can use to acquire land for our future fire station.
Thank you, Jeff. Brooke? There you are. Brooke, please proceed.
Sure. I was basically providing some support for this agenda item and just preparing the ordinance itself. I think Jeff did an excellent job explaining it. So this ordinance that is available for you tonight for your consideration is just to pull the funds of $162,000 out of fund balance and put it into the budget to allow us to make a purchase if that is deemed appropriate.
I think council has certainly seen your report and the calculations on that and the recommendation. Does council have any questions of Brooke or the village manager on this subject at this time? If not, I believe we have a motion on ordinance 2105.
Go ahead, Jane.
Okay.
I move to approve ordinance 2105, amending the ordinance appropriating funds for operations regarding revenues and expenditures of the general fund for the village of Pinehurst.
Motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, the discussion and consideration of a resolution authorizing the sale of surplus capital assets. Jeff?
All right, thanks, John. I'll see if I can steal Brooks' thunder again here. From time to time, we have the requirement to surplus or sell our old property as we're replacing it with new property, and sometimes that sale is likely to or may cross a threshold where I have the authority to do it myself, and so we have to get approval from the council to do that. We got a couple of those for you to entertain the opportunity to approve sale on at this time as well. Brooke?
Great. Yep, great job again. This is a routine item. We currently are operating under Village Ordinance 1702, which does allow the village manager to dispose of certain surplus assets with a value of $10,000 or less. So most of what we sell is well below that limit. We do sell these items on the village's GovDeals website, which is an online electronic auction site that's very similar to eBay. And we sell the items that we no longer have a need for or are not currently using. This time we do have 2 items for your approval to dispose of tonight. One of those is a 2004 Ford F-650 that was formerly used by the fire department as their rescue truck, and a 2006 Harley Electric Glide motorcycle that was formerly used in the police department and is no longer being used. So these items may potentially reach the $10,000 threshold, and we just want to make sure that we have clear authority from you to dispose of those assets. So there's a resolution for your consideration tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
So, Brooke, I guess I would have to say we're from one end of the vehicle spectrum to the other with these 2 items tonight.
The largest to the smallest, that's right.
I think the council members collectively want to get together and buy the motorcycle, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. We'll have to wait and see. Again, we've seen the report and understand the background to it. I hope that the regulation is needed to have someone garner more than $10,000 for this, and we'll go from there. Is there any question back to the council, from the council to Brooke on this? Seeing none. I believe we have a resolution for that too. Number 8.
I move to approve resolution 2106, authorizing the village manager to dispose of certain surplus capital assets for the village of Pinehurst.
Motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I see none opposed. The motion does carry. Thank you very much, council, and thank you very much, Brooke.
Thank you.
That will now take us to item number 9, which is other business. Is there any other business that the council wishes to bring before this regular meeting?
No.
No.
None at all? Okay. Next in line, we have comments from attendees.
I'm sorry, I do.
Excuse me,
I
Kevin?
do. I want to officially put in the record Judy's recommendation of planting trees in those areas where we could improve. I kind of don't want that idea lost, so I want to just repeat it.
As luck would have it, Kevin, I had wrote that note to myself when I saw the same picture, so.
I think that that's not something that I thought of, and I think it's an innovative idea, and I think that we That's the only other business I have that's grabbed that idea and do something with it.
Should we send that to the beautification committee? Is that where that would belong, Jeff?
Yeah, I think they certainly ought to be involved in something like that. It's, of course, we're talking about a potential program that would have very far-reaching impacts across the village, and I think we need to study that very carefully, but.
Yeah.
I've actually heard too from residents lately, not related to the ordinance, but with trees in general and marking the fact that we are a tree city and received another award for that this last year. But also pointing out that in the village right-of-way, in other words, our responsibility, there are a number of trees that have suffered either from vines growing in them and maybe could use a little more care. So I think as we go about consideration of these various aspects of our tree cover and ordinances covering all that, that we look at some of our own responsibilities in the right-of-ways and make sure we're doing the best we can as well.
And that's
Judy?
another reminder, John, for people to use my VOP. If they see a tree like that needs some TLC, just turn that in and it'll get to create a work order for public services and streets and grounds. So, it's the best way to see it as people encounter it.
Indeed, my VOP on the village website is an excellent way to convey questions and problems to village government, and we can track it well, respond well, and get things done. So that's a wonderful tool that we have on our website. We do have comments from attendees this evening, and I believe the village clerk will read several messages that have come in the recent time frame, and then we'll take comments from the public if there are any.
Okay, Mayor, the first is from Steve Woodward. He says, "Good evening, mask enforcers do all of us a favor by concealing their expressions of self-righteous indignation, but consider their persistent disregard for the damage caused by capacity limits on restaurants and bars, by classroom closures, disregarding their dire consequences for children, and by the dangerous psychological effects of the stay-at-home mentality. These, sadly, are on full display even now, even as many states and communities are saying, simply enough, I support Lydia Bosch of this council and Mitch Lancaster of Southern Pines and the volunteers who lead Freedom Matters North Carolina. The pilot's characterization of Lydia, Mitch, and their fellow patriots as bullies seeking to shame business owners is outright fiction. Lydia has repeated many times that we all need to behave responsibly. Responsibility is making an effort to support truth from those peddling politicized falsehoods. Freedom is God-given, enshrined in our Constitution, and thus we must never yield to those driven by political agendas disguised as public safety campaigns." Steve Woodward. The next comment comes from Linda Vandercook. "Dear Village Council, thank you for this opportunity to submit a public comment. Lydia Bosch represents the vast and long-standing majority of local residents in her efforts to expose the state mask mandate abuse. We support her fully and wish the council to join her in her efforts, guaranteeing us our constitutional rights." Lydia Vandercook of Whispering Pines. And the last comment is from Kevin Lewis. "I lived in Pinehurst for 25 years and wrote over 600 articles on the village and county for over 10 years for the Fayetteville Observer and the Sandhills Citizen. I now live in the county seat of Moore County, but I am proud of our tourist industry. Therefore, I was saddened to see that Village Councilwoman Lydia Bosch put her allegiance to Stephen Woodward and the Moore County Republican Newsletter over her oath to protect and serve the village of Pinehurst and its merchants. She put her name as the point of contact on a false statement proclaiming that the mask mandate and social distancing is over. The merchants of Pinehurst and neighboring towns were threatened with economic ruin by Republican volunteers if they did not take the poster and display it on March 1st. She overrode a state mandate on masks at the direction of Stephen Woodward and his unnamed allies. If visitors to Pinehurst saw businesses not complying with health directives, our standing as a tourist destination would be compromised in travel publications. After the pilot in April published the photo of Lydia Bosch handing over hundreds of handmade masks to First Health, I called her to applaud her only to be told that she herself did not wear a mask on her trips to the hardware and supermarket stores. I asked her why she publicly participated in a photo op when she did not believe in the mask herself, only to be told, "Oh well," and concluded the call. Lydia Bosch did not succumb to COVID, but I hope she remembers, as we should, the villagers who did. Kevin Lewis, Carthage.
Those are the comments written. Thank you. Are there any individuals who wish to speak this evening to the village council? Yes, sir. You can use the podium or you can use the table there. Please identify yourself. Sir, I'm sorry, the gentleman sitting here in the blue shirt, did this gentleman ask you to move so for his convenience in speaking? Well, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry, that's not I thank you for that. That's not appropriate, and we will not take comments like that at the public comments time of the Pinehurst Village Council. Do you understand that, sir?
Yes, I do.
Are any of the comments you have tonight in that category of language?
Probably not.
I hope they're not. Please proceed.
I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about,
Who are you?
Please identify your name.
my name is Justin Bradford, Miss Bosch, you know who I am. I wanted to talk about misinformation tonight. And I think it's really appropriate here, just the level of disrespect we've seen. I asked this gentleman to give me some space, he wouldn't do it.
Please use the microphone, Mr. Bradford, so we can hear you.
I asked the gentleman to give me some space, he wouldn't do it.
Mr. Bradford, you have the floor. Please proceed.
You've asked all these people to abide by the governor's order. And I just want to point out, for the record, and for everybody, that we are existing in a time right now where I think white privilege is literally on display. You got a group of people who are violating an order by the governor, and the police are right there and they do nothing about it. So, I mean, I've never lived anywhere in my life where you could break a law and just...
I'll ask the members of the public who are here to be quiet while someone else is speaking. Those are the policies of the Pinehurst Village government with respect to comments made at our regular meetings. This gentleman has the floor. I wish he would be concise and continue. If others of you wish to speak tonight and are not redundant, you're welcome to do so in a manner that's appropriate and not otherwise. If that's not understood, and I hope it will be, I don't want to have to take any further action. Mr. Bradford, would you continue, please, and try to keep to 3 minutes?
I think it's appropriate that Mr. Woodward was a commenter tonight, because my qualifications to speak on this issue of misinformation are based on the fact that I have a degree in public communication and human relations. And so in the university setting, that's in the same college. Mr. Woodward is a communications specialist, a journalist, broadcasting, PR, and marketing. So when he says the word uprising, I find it to be quite disingenuous for him then later to cry in the pilot about having to parse his words. How many master carpenters do we know who might choose the wrong tool and then complain about it? Why not just use the right word? Okay? It's a campaign of misinformation. Now, among other things that I studied in college, Goebbels, Jim Jones. If you think Pepsi-Cola is not interested in this, you're wrong. Okay, there's a tie. Marketing, misinformation, propaganda, it's all a branch of the same tree. Okay? And so when a person like Steve Woodward uses the word uprising, he knows what he's saying. He knows what he's saying. Okay? So I don't know why we would complain about parsing words. And Miss Bosch lent her name to that. It was within, an inch. So she certainly is a party to the misinformation campaign. Now, I've spoken to about a dozen business owners in Pinehurst and Southern Pines. And some of the things, a couple of them felt intimidated when they were approached. Now, also had a conversation with Mr. Sanborn These people went out and they distributed flyers in the village. They didn't file a permit. Now, I happen to also know that the people who have discussed this with me have asked me to keep that confidence and not reveal. They don't want to come in and complain about it. They don't want to be, looked at or, they don't want a part of the trouble, but they also don't want to feel imposed upon by somebody coming in and literally passing out what amounts to misinformation in their business. Because you see the type of disrespect that occurs. The mayor of the village has asked these people to wear a mask. I asked this guy to give me some space. I don't know him. You don't want to give me space. It's disrespectful. Bottom line, period. And you know it. 500,000 Americans are dead. And we're having an argument about masks. Honestly, one of those officers out there, I said, why are you wearing a mask? You know what his answer to me was, sir? Because there are people who are smarter than me who say that we should. Now, the reason I have this on is not because I'm afraid or I'm some flower who's going to wilt. I deal with clients who are from 100 years old. I think my youngest client is a sophomore in high school in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I don't have the luxury to stay home, to not do business, okay? Of the businesses that I own, one of them this year was completely destroyed by COVID. We lost all of our profit. So I'm not undamaged by COVID, okay? I understand. I have empathy for people who have lost business. I've worked hard to get clients loans for the PPP. At the same time, we have a village council member distributing misinformation. And I have some of that right here. Now, I know that I've emailed some of the council, but I really don't know what's been done. Now, a part of this campaign includes Emily Rainey. I think it's interesting that, don't shake your head at me. She's on Facebook posting about it. Lynn Goldhammer said that you and Emily Rainey are a part of the group, Lydia. Lynn Goldhammer. I spoke to her on the telephone. I got an email from her, okay? They also went and they flyered in Southern Pines, and they inserted flyers into the mailbox. So,
Mr. Bradford, may I ask you to try to conclude your comments? I very much appreciate your comments, understand them.
Understood.
And to keep them directed to the village.
I really just want to know.
And keep them just directed to the village council. Thank you.
If we talk about values or the vision or the mission statement of this village, I would really like to know, the values talk about teamwork. I have clients who are dental hygienists who've worn a mask for 20-some years. How are we being a good team member with an elected official? You think about our big employers, First Health. Is anyone here tonight from First Health here to speak out against mask usage? I'm going to probably doubt that. And how does an elected official of the village dovetail into the values, the vision, and the mission by partnering with a Republican operative, an Army PSYOPs officer, not filing permits to do stuff, and go and hand out disinformation? And part of the problem with this is they've got this information, but it has no citation. There is no court of law. There is no dissertation panel. There is nothing where you can go and just say this is a fact without some kind of citation. 500,000 Americans are dead. That's a fact. We know those numbers. We can argue how or why they died, but I'm going to keep wearing a mask so that I don't infect a client, okay? And for no other reason. That's it. And I think it's really shameful that the people of this village have to endure an elected official who commits these kind of acts. Okay? This is not necessarily a place I want to live anymore.
Mr. Everett, thank you for your comments. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? If you do so, would you approach the microphone, please, and identify yourself. Could you identify yourself by name, sir? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Strickland. My name is David Peter Green. I go by Pete. My wife and I live on Linden Road. I've been in Pinehurst about 6 years, just shy of 6 years. We've had 4 different properties within Pinehurst. As a matter of fact, the house we live in now was my in-laws' house for almost 30 years. So we do have a vested interest in this community.
Pete, may I just ask you to just step up to the microphone a little bit further and they'll all be captured. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
I was going to button my jacket up this evening, but COVID and the lockdown kind of, last time I needed this thing, it was a lot bigger back then. So, one of those things. Yeah, you're sitting a little too close to me. So,
sir, if you make your comments in about 3 minutes, if you would.
I will. I also have a degree in communications, along with a degree in history and degrees in speech pathology. I can easily trace my lineage back to General Nathaniel Greene, who fought with General Washington. A member of my family has been in every conflict, both official and unofficial, that this country has had since its beginning. Some that people even say didn't take place. And I believe this makes my family a patriot. Demonstrates our love for the freedom that this country does offer. I'm a Master Mason of the Southern Pines 484 Lodge. My wife and I are members of the Pinehurst Country Club, and I am the youngest member of the 10 Whistles organization, which I know you are also a member of, Mayor Strickland. I also work for the Moore County school system. As a retired teacher, did some substituting to help out. But tonight I am here on this group, this famous ghost group, Freedom Matters, North Carolina, that apparently we don't have the testicular fortitude to come forward and be visible, but I am here. And there are several of us in attendance here today. We're not going to be redundant and everybody come up and speak. I'm going to say the words that need to be said. First of all, we are a peaceful, bipartisan group. We are not the Republican Nazis that everybody calls us. I do not enjoy a white privilege. I am here because my family taught me that freedom matters. My independence does matter. Our only goal is to stand up for the freedoms that the Constitution has promised us. And when I refer to the Constitution, I mean the Constitution of the United States of America. We are nonviolent, as I said, and we are anything but insurrectionists. Anybody that knows any of us, we are not. We are peaceful. We want to protect our own freedoms. We feel it's our responsibility to speak up and to educate people within our community, within our council, within other branches of our government, when our civil liberties are being illegally and unconstitutionally inhibited through executive orders out of Raleigh. One man should not be able to tell an entire community what to do. That's what legislatures are for. That's what assemblies are for. So on behalf of the Moore County Freedom Matters, I would like to go on record here tonight and show our support for Councilwoman Lydia Bosch and her efforts to stand up and challenge the legality, constitutionality, and validity of our governor's mandates. This is not how a state should be run, Mayor. Councilwoman Bosch has been degraded and verbally assaulted at these very halls, even this evening, has been vilified in the press, and not to put too much stock in the rag the pilot. I'm sorry, I was a journalist for a while, so I can say that. I've listened to the lies, the half-truths, and I'm disgusted by them because I know what goes on. I've been to these meetings where we discuss how to peacefully try to educate people. I'm a little ashamed, Mayor, of this council's inability to stand up against this type of behavior. I appreciate you raising your voice and trying to keep it in line tonight, but that kind of bothers me, sir. Councilwoman Bosch, I'd like to say directly to you, thank you. You've reflected the thoughts and opinions of the people that you represent. And we truly appreciate your efforts in accurately representing us. That's what we elected you to do. I'm a little curious, Mayor, and I don't want to be degrading, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but why will the rest of this council not stand with Councilwoman Bosch? It seems to me, and to several others, and it may be opinion, it may be optics, that you kind of sit on your hands and we're letting Raleigh dictate how Pinehurst should be run. We've failed to put our kids back in school. Education is important. We've stood by, it seems, and let these long-standing family businesses that my father-in-law has talked about over the last 30 years disappear. They have evaporated. There are provisions in the governor's mandate that allow for people that can't wear masks due to medical reasons. Why has this council not informed the public and these businesses that there are provisions in there, that they can't do that? And when they are bullied by a mask-wearing public or by these business owners, something has not been done about that. We've been called bullies. We're going to take your masks off of you. No, we just want the information to be out there and to make the decision for that. We ourselves have been bullied. I get harassed every time I go into the grocery store. The only time that I have not been harassed at a Harris Teeter for not wearing a mask is when I open carried a .40 caliber Glock. No one said anything at that point in time, and it is sad that this community has come to something like that. Again, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but it seems like this council would rather tackle softball issues like a tree ordinance versus something a little bit tougher, a little bit harder, like opening back up our economy, putting our kids back in schools, and saving our businesses. This would kind of require you to get out of the comfort zone a little bit, and I know that's difficult. It's difficult for anyone. But all I'm asking you guys to do is take a stand, like Councilwoman Bosch or Councilman Mitch Lancaster out of Southern Pines. There are 16 states that currently do not have mask mandates. And if you look at their economies, they're flourishing. Their COVID numbers are going down. Why hasn't this village decided that we're going to push countywide, statewide to do the same thing? It's possible. You guys have the power. This is what we need to do. Now, the people here with me tonight, we're just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of us. You think there's just a few of us here? There's not. There's a lot of us in this area. And it looks like many on this council feel that your passivity may make you indestructible. I hope that's not the case. I hope it's not the case that if you have councilman or councilwoman in front of your name, that you feel indestructible. Because just remember, the last time something indestructible went up against an iceberg, outcome wasn't good. Edmund Burke said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." We're just asking y'all to actually look at numbers. If evidence is presented to you, please look at it and follow through accordingly. Do not let one man in Raleigh dictate how this village works, because there's a lot of us here that feel the same way. You guys are elected officials. Y'all are supposed to reflect the voices of those that you represent and help protect our rights. All we're asking is you to please do your job. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Good. Sir, do I understand you were speaking for the rest of the group that's here tonight? Is it? Fine, thank you. Are there any other comments?
My name's Alan Finch. I'm also part of the same group.
Excuse me, could you just speak a little closer?
My name is Alan Finch. I'm also part of the same group with North Carolina Freedom Matters. And I would like to say one thing. Justin was kind of right about one thing you said.
Excuse me, could you speak in the microphone?
Yeah. We need, just hold in your hand if you like, sir. That's good.
Justin was a little bit right. There is a lot of misinformation, okay, all around us, from both sides. Everyone, this is going to be debated for decades or centuries to come over all the numbers, over all of what's going on. The one thing that we can change is what we can do moving forward. And this is about freedom. This is about, I will fight for his ability to get up and say what he said. The difference is he would never fight for me to do what we're doing here today. And that's the problem, is we do need to come together. We need to come together and fight for what's right. And what's right is, just like you said, getting everything back going. Look at the states. The math is there. They're opening up, numbers are going down, the economy is going up. Why are we not doing the same thing here? And that's what we need to do. Every one of you need to be held accountable. You need to ask yourself that question. You don't necessarily have to answer it tonight. You need to look at yourself in the mirror. Say, what can I do to stop this and make it better? And wearing, putting that mask on and just letting the world go by is not doing it for anybody. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Is there another speaker? Yes, ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Sue Forsyth Green, and I have a letter from a couple of friends of mine that were unable to be here tonight. Village Council, the harmful and unconstitutional restrictions, see First and 14th Amendments, imposed on us are irresponsible, political, and outright rigorous scientific merit. COVID-19 restrictions have replaced a heavy burden on our community, impacting the citizens of Pinehurst socially, economically, and spiritually. Business owners have had to close their doors permanently. School children are suffering from depression and continue to fall behind academically. Families are experiencing an increase in drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, and suicide. Fellow citizens are experiencing intimidation, discrimination, and coercion as a result of these arbitrary mandates. We, the people, are fully capable of assessing risk and making decisions for ourselves. The government tyranny we are experiencing today is exactly what our founding fathers warned us about. I ask you to hold a public hearing specifically for citizens to voice their disapproval of the government's response to COVID-19. I ask you to declare the village of Pinehurst a sanctuary village, protecting the citizenry and your constituency free of any COVID restrictions, and uphold your constitutional protections. Our counties, cities, and towns have accomplished this across our great nation. So can you. Jared and Aria Reyes.
What's the last name, please?
Reyes, R-A-Y-E-S. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I don't believe there are any other comments planned. Appreciate you all being here tonight. You certainly have the ability to speak to the village council. That is your right to do so. We've heard the comments, and we'll take into consideration anything we think is appropriate for the village to do. At this point, I think we finished our regular meeting agenda. We're going to move into a work session. However, is there a motion to close the regular meeting?
I'll move to adjourn the regular meeting.
I second that.
Motion by Judy Davis, second by Kevin Drum to close the regular meeting. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting is closed. We'll take a quick break and open the work session at, shall we say, 7:15, just a few minutes. Be all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Be right
Thank
back.
you.
Be right back.
Thank you, everyone.
Heading back upstairs. Okay.
All right, I think all the council is back. Jane's coming. I'll call to order the work session for March 9th, 2021 of the Pinehurst Village Council. We have one listed item and a couple other items to discuss tonight. Any other follow-up that council members have on other items we'll talk about for future agendas as well. We have the local bill request. Let me paint a little picture and put a little more background on this. We've all had in our mind, I think, for a while that we'd like to work with our state delegation in developing some local bills that would be appropriate for Pinehurst, especially built around the issues we've been discussing about the USGA coming here and other matters, transportation matters, other things that we think would be appropriate for the village to pursue on a local bill basis. And to that end, you've all provided some input on issues we might want to retain and put into a local bill. And on February 23rd, we all received a letter, or some of us received a letter, I did not actually, from Senator McGinnis's office indicating that submission of local bills for the state Senate were due to be in place by February 25th, 2 days after the letter. And we chose not to do anything about that particular deadline because we did have a prearranged meeting with Representative Bowles and Senator McGinnis for the end of that week on the 27th, I think it was. And at that meeting, we did talk about the idea of some local legislation. And as it happens, the state Senate and the state House have different deadlines to submit local bills. And we were made aware that the House has a deadline of March 3rd, I believe. So we opted to take the route of putting the local bill through the House. And the only thing that we weren't told at the time was that a bill supplied into the Senate, and I'm repeating now what I've been told by a representative from Jamie Bowles' office, just to educate us a little bit on the process. If you submit a local bill request through the Senate, you can do it in what I would sort of call a placeholder manner. In other words, you have a title and it sort of describes what you think you want to do, and you have some time to work out what the language would be. We didn't meet that deadline by choice, as I mentioned, but whereas if you submit a local bill into the House, you have to supply more information, unlike the Senate procedures. We didn't know that at the time that we last talked about this. And so very quickly last week when we, Jeff and Judy and I had some information that, actually just Jeff and I think, that we would need to supply some more detail to the bill title that was agreed by Representative Bowles' office. We sat down and I wrote out some things, a couple of general points I thought would describe some of the issues we wanted to have in a local bill. Jeff was kind enough to put some good detail around it. Judy was able to look at it a bit, I think, just today and supplied some other commentary that you've seen. Now, the other part of submitting through the House is that the deadline to kind of submit your first version with some flesh around it is March 25th, so we have a little while to work out the language. And then begin a process of working with Representative Bowles' office, but also a bill writing group which exists, as you may know, in state government that takes bills, either local bills or general bills, and writes them specific to terms that the delegation has recommended on the one hand, or in a local bill case, what the municipality is recommending. So we have a deadline of March 25th to supply some detail to Jamie Bowles' office, but they need a chance to turn it around, of course. So what I hope we might accomplish tonight is simply, on the one hand, to look at the commentary and the back and forth from Judy and Jeff and myself. And I think, in fact, Kevin and Jane, you've offered already some helpful comments this evening, earlier today, actually. And we need to come up with something to submit to them, and I think we can and should do that by the end of the week, so that if we get it up to Jamie's office, he and his staff could then come back with questions for us and ultimately get it to the right bill writing committee. That's why they want to know kind of the overall purpose and requirements of the local bill as presented, so they can get it to the right people that write legislation on this subject or that subject, but not something else. That's what I know about the process. And we're rapidly learning here as we go along. So I think the other thing I learned, which I mentioned this afternoon, is that whereas I think we rightly feel there is an element of supporting the state's commitment to the USGA and the benefit it'll bring to the entire state of North Carolina, that we've been part of that process, and therefore things we might do here would ultimately, we think, in some ways support and help the state. A local bill is a local bill, and it really deals with needs you have locally. And so to the degree we either use the word North Carolina or assert other aspects of benefit to North Carolina that come from our potential local bill, it kind of leads the bill in the wrong direction, and it may in fact become, a general statute bill, not a local bill, and we don't really want to accomplish that. I think Jane came up with a concept about that earlier today. Now, I see Mike Newman is listening right now, and Mike, we weren't going to draw you into this brief discussion on this, but do you know anything more than maybe the rest of us do about submission of local bills into the legislature? Have I reflected pretty much what the routine is to be?
You've basically covered logistically what I know about it in terms of how it gets started and where it's going to go. I don't know much more than that, other than the legal effect of local bills, that kind of thing, but we all know that. So.
Okay. Well, again, this all has come up in the last few days that we need to be a little more specific than I thought we would need to be. I was hoping we'd have the opportunity to submit the kind of placeholder bill, have some months really to develop thoughts and ideas on this with Jamie Bowles and Senator McGinnis, but we need to put a little more flesh around that in order to meet the needs of the State House. So I'm open to comment from council and from Jeff or Mike for that matter on the way forward, but again, I think we should take a little time over the next couple of days to reflect on what you've seen, rough as it may be tonight, and maybe come up with a little more crafted response. So let's open it up to questions and comments because we want to get everybody up to date on this process.
John, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Has our local delegation indicated what they're willing to give us? I mean, a local bill can sometimes be like a letter to Santa Claus, and Santa Claus can say no to certain things. And I'm just wondering, have we had the conversation about what they are willing to submit?
No,
or
we touched on that
we had a meeting with Mines.
Yeah, well, when we had the meeting with Senator McGinnis and Representative Bowles on the, what was it, Jeff, the 27th of February, just a week or 10 days ago now, we did touch on this. And I think their support, general, as the discussion was at the time, I think there's some things probably related to transportation that we've talked about that might be a part of that process. Jeff, please correct me if I'm wrong. Judy, too. But we didn't take it too far. And at that time, of course, we didn't know we would need to be more specific. And in fact, that's why I thought the sort of placeholder approach, which I thought would be the way to go, with them would allow us that time to talk about some needs, get their reaction, and develop something we would jointly, agree this is a good idea. So I guess the net answer is we don't know a lot about what they might support or might not, and we should, and maybe we still have time to do that.
It might also be helpful to think about this as an iterative process. What I envision unfolding is that we would pull together a draft of things that we might want to address in a local bill, and we would send that to a local delegation, and they would give us some feedback about the degree to which they think various aspects of it are supportable, and then we might, come to some agreement on some compromise of some sort.
I like that. I think this is.
Before they actually get to the point of supporting something in the General Assembly.
Right.
I think that's a wise approach.
And having, I think another important point here, excuse me, Judy, is that whatever we come up with ourselves and in working with our representatives, it's fairly unlikely that it will be acted upon in this calendar year. But the idea is not to, in my mind anyway, not to wait. Let's get something discussed. Let's get something ready to go so we have the opportunity in the more likely approval session of a year from now is ready to go and we've got it, finely tuned. I don't want to push it down the road and come back to it at a later time if we can avoid that.
Agreed.
Okay,
That's a
Judy.
good point too, John. Yeah, so the other thing I would add is that there's definitely was support for transportation on NC5. Looking at bringing in some of those scheduled upgrades and enhancements on 5. They definitely, concurred with our thinking that would be something that would be beneficial to Pinehurst for the USGA coming in the future. So I think that there was definite alignment there and concurrence that they would support what we were after.
Mm-hmm.
That would mean, according to our conversations with NCDOT, that movement of Morganton would have to occur because that's what we were told. So, what I like to think about this is when we talk to them, what is the goal in mind? And the goal in mind is to do what they're already planning to do. I think that's such a simple way to say it. We want everything you've already planning on doing as a state. We just are concerned that we are not going to be able to welcome the world here and present, and I'll not use the state because I hear what you're saying, John, present Pinehurst as a window into North Carolina. I think we need to be successful. And I think that asking for what they already have planned to do, but asking for, I don't know how to say it, acceleration. Acceleration. I think that's that's just asking for something they already plan on doing. I mean, it's not even an ask. It's more of just a blinding glimpse of the obvious. Don't you think, we got this beautiful meteorite, that's Lydia's term, that landed in the middle of town. And I think they're going to think, well, we've handled U.S. Opens before, but we haven't handled
multiple
U.S. Opens with USGA here and all. I think this is going to be different. And I think this is going to be different. I think they're going to go back at you and say, you already handled U.S. Opens fine. I think we're all feeling, with the growth in the state of North Carolina and with the announcement that this is going to be a very well-attended event. And it's kind of a window into future events and bigger events. And I don't know. I thought that would be a good way to look at this. The ask is just what you're already going to do for us, just accelerated. So that's just one comment.
Good.
I didn't understand the second one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, what you're saying is very helpful, very good, yeah.
Yeah.
But Kevin, you said the ask is they were just asking them to accelerate it. Never have we had this many U.S. Opens coming our way, plus the USGA. So I just feel like we're anticipating what it's going to be. Thank you for using my meteorite analogy, but we're anticipating, we're here, we're boots on the ground. We're anticipating what might happen, and we're asking for their assistance before it does happen, and it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now, Now,
that would include pedestrian, or, it's all transportation related and movement of people. And I think this makes a lot of sense, and it's on their roads. And I guess I don't understand how that one of these items would be, the 1 cent thing would be managed. I don't really understand how that would be managed. So that's the question I had on that item.
Yeah, that sort of structure, any financial structure.
I don't know how it's possible for it to be implemented and managed. If you could help me understand that, then I can help you.
The same way occupancy tax is managed anywhere else in the state.
Okay, so you're saying 1 penny, not 1%. So it says 1 penny.
It's a thought starter.
Same thing, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a thought starter. I mean, it's an idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd have to flesh out details on anything. Any one of these proposals, we'd have to flesh out details.
I thought it was an additional percent.
Yeah, that was when I wrote it. That was the intent. Yeah.
Yeah, because then you're not taking the county.
Right.
Yeah.
That wasn't clear to me when I read
Incremental.
it, so you know.
The word incremental.
Yeah, it should be incremental. And I would tell you this, and this might make you uncomfortable, but I think that if our state delegation was involved with the spending of that money, it would be easier to get that done. In other words, we want to use it for USGA impacts. So, and I think that if we position that we're working together, and it's not just about us getting money, I think we'll be more successful. So that would be my recommendation on that, because, they want us, we have some, some conflict, but they want us to be successful. And I think that giving it a shared control, like a mutual agreed on where it's spent, might be an easier sell.
Kevin, maybe you could put that down in written form and be very helpful if you do that.
Could spell out the parameters of what it can be spent on.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So it's doesn't look like a cash taking. It's about, there's things we don't have the ability to do without it, and I don't think that's clear when I read it. So I think we're going to have to articulate that better.
Okay.
Did Michael get to see this document? No.
Right. Now, we left off a little earlier with
the point of sharing things with Michael on this discussion.
Yeah. He was doing it on the fly, and But I think all we're trying to do is be good stewards and make sure we're the best hosts. And, accidents, pedestrian impacts, or people saying that, gosh, that was pretty ugly, that entrance into Pinehurst. I expected something different. I think all that impacts the state. And I think everything we're trying to do is just to be good stewards and good hosts. And as long as we keep our heart in that place, I think we might have a fighting chance here.
Yeah. Now, Jane had I think what we all thought was a very interesting idea of a kind of a preamble, and it was well written. I only had a little chance to look at it before our meeting started, but that's an additional way to approach this. Jane, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
You have to go off mute, Jane.
You're on mute.
On mute.
Fussy. Well, so anyway.
The preamble.
I don't have it in front of me. I just put something together to explain that we're doing this in the context. We're doing work in the village in the context of making things better on a regional basis. But we need help to do things within the village in order to show that it's got more far-reaching benefit without trying to get caught up in that, but it's really now not a local law anymore situation. That's all. I'm just trying to.
Jane, I got your words here, so I'm going to read your words, okay?
So you'll all want to listen. This is great.
We could have a preamble that says something like, the VOP is in a unique position to be able to host the USDA and its various golf tournaments, which in turn attract golf tourism and other high-quality development in North Carolina. The VOP has undertaken this host responsibility at the cost of offering tax incentives to the USDA and resort, and is also working to ensure an attractive and safe environment in the village for the USDA, its guests, and other visitors in order to maintain and enhance the qualities that first attracted the USDA to Pinehurst, thus encouraging further high-quality development here. To that end, the village requests the following assistance from the state legislature. And so by putting in the preamble, that would eliminate saying North Carolina
In the ask itself.
Actions.
And I think it's a unique idea, but I do think everything should be positioned as, this is about, the agronomy being successful at NC State. It really is bigger than us. It's bigger than us, and if we can't present it as bigger than us, I'm concerned that they might dismiss it. I think we're all feeling the heat of being perfect hosts.
Yeah.
We want to set the table.
Yeah.
For the meteorite.
The beautiful meteorite. It's a pretty meteorite.
I like that language, Jane.
Sure, that's not taken the wrong way. It's just, I think we're going to have to, we've hosted U.S. Opens. We're successful at hosting U.S. Opens. They run really well. Why do we need this now? It's different. There's a lot of difference.
Planning.
Dippy.
Our traffic patterns are different.
There's more at stake.
There's more at stake.
There you go. There you go.
Well, we're going to have to
turn a phrase, write that down.
Because that's going to be the first thing that's said.
Right.
Hey, Jeff, what's more at stake? Because we've done U.S. Opens in 99, 2005, and 2014. What's more at stake now?
Because the USGA has come with this commitment or this, what do they call it? Not the hubs, but this anchor sites, right? They've come with this commitment for anchor sites, but it's only guaranteed for the next 5, right? And actually financially, the degree to which they're committed decreases with every one that they do. And so we want to make sure that we create and maintain the environment that causes them to make that a long-term commitment.
Right.
That's right.
Okay, and I agree with that, and I think that's an important concept to just hold on to and not lose sight of.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just not hosting 5 U.S. Opens and we go about our merry way. No, we're talking about a long time.
Yeah.
But
And that's important.
And more than that, it's really become the analog of St. Andrews in the relationship between golf and Europe and the RNA. I mean, it's really a whole different thing here. So
Is anybody taking notes?
Elevated.
Yeah.
All these pearls of wisdom, is anybody writing them down?
You were, Jane?
No.
I do think.
I thought you were.
Well, actually, I thought, just a second, that's a very good point. Actually, I thought someone was taking some notes, and if they're not, maybe, I think Jeff will try. But Jane, why don't you?
Go back and look at the video.
I think we will look at the tape. Now, this is good. Now, during our meeting at 5:27 today, I'm just checking some emails because I thought I saw earlier a communication from Jamie's office. It turns out there is something, and it has to do with some examples of even local bills that do have a financial component. So it sounds like that's not different maybe than some of the things we're talking about. So in about 2 seconds here, I'm going to forward that around. It was just sent to Jeff and myself at 5:30 this afternoon, and I think that'll help guide this discussion a little bit further. So I'll do that in just a minute. I think what we need to do is kind of reflect on these core thoughts and look at whatever the example is that's been sent over by Jamie Bull's office, at least for that content, which may not be exactly what we're looking at, but it might be after we have a chance to reflect on it. And I guess Jeff and I can get together on this with all of your input over the next few days. I said by the end of the week, but Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I think we need to get it right, not get it too fast, but there is a little bit of a time frame here. We need to get back to the representative's office so they can get it to the right people after talking with us. Judy, do you have any other thoughts on that? Or on...
No, I mean, I think we've knocked this around as much as we can tonight. And I think you're right. Let's go offline and try and get people to send their comments in and then give it another turn or two, and we can probably do this by email.
Yep.
But I just want to add to what Jeff said, why there's more at stake. I think the expectations are higher. And we have to live up to this home of golf, this St. Andrews-like expectation. I think I think that's different than going to Pinehurst to a U.S. Open. You're going to Pinehurst in the USGA.
Home of American Golf.
Home of American Golf. I think expectations have changed. And we not only have to, we have to live up to those expectations. And I think that is, we're different, more people that haven't been to U.S. Opens might come.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Jane, you getting all that down?
I'm writing as fast as I can.
Use the keyboard.
All
right.
I just wanted to add to Jeff's thought, what's more at stake, expectations are higher.
Okay.
Well, here's what I've got. There's more at stake. It's not just 1 or even 5 U.S. Opens, but more for the future over a long time. The St. Andrews model, the expectations are higher, and it affects the whole region. And Kevin, you said something else about the Sandhills Community College. Home of American, what is it?
Agronomy.
Agronomy section, yeah.
No, I don't think we'd say that. I'm just trying to say when we privately talk.
Well, let's put them all down, and then we'll pick the ones we want.
I'm not saying our local board, but we're trying to make sure that, all this feeds out into the state. But
Right on.
Yeah.
We're trying to set the table for the beautiful meteorite. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. My recommendation is we move on to a couple other items here. I think we've got great input on this one, and we'll hopefully come up with a very effective description and a good working relationship with Senator McGinnis and Jamie Bowles. I'm sure they'll be helpful. Under other work session business, I have a couple of items, one for discussion here, at least briefly, and it has to do with our friends, Mr. Ross and Mr. Olmsted. I'm going to make a few introductory comments, and then Lydia's going to make a few other comments, and I think we'd want to carry this item forward, maybe to our next work session. Next year is 2022, right? Guess what happens in 2022? I'll tell you.
Birthday.
Olmsted's 200th birthday and Donald Ross's 150th birthday are both next year. And I think among us, we've been aware of Ross on the one hand and Olmsted on the other with the birthday next year. And then now it's starting to come out from the Olmsted Society in Massachusetts that has a plan for kind of a national event of some sort, I think. I don't know exactly the extent of that, but Lydia and I were told about it a couple of weeks ago. And the Ross Society on the one hand is looking ahead to Donald Ross's 150th birthday. Also, I've had a letter from Paul Dunn about this subject just in the last several days, and I'll forward that around tomorrow. He's had some discussions with other officials here in the county and the resort, and we'll want to follow up on that. But he did want the council to be aware of this and take up the issue. And he was talking about it mainly from Donald Ross's point of view, and I don't think he's aware of Olmsted, but we'll bring him up to date on that too. So now with that, Lydia and I had a call earlier today pursuant to the NPS consulting study, and I think if Lydia could just identify and bring a few points on that, we can then defer this discussion a little bit to our next meeting. But Lydia, go right ahead. This is an important discussion we had this morning. Actually.
Yeah, I'm sorry all of you couldn't be on the call today, but I thought we talked to the Olmsted expert for about 30 minutes and an hour and a half later. Wasn't it about an hour and a half, John? and it was like trying to drink water out of a fire hose. But this guy is so delightful and so knowledgeable about Olmsted. I could listen to his stories all day long. He gave us just a fascinating background about Olmsted, but two things that he stood out to me, and he said, Olmsted, a word he used a lot, one thing that was important to him was beauty. And he said Olmsted talked about the unfathomable, restorative, and equalizing force of beauty. And he talked about the healing role of walking in nature and seeing green. So Olmsted liked to bring this healing power of green in his landscape. And so John tied that in with this place was set up as a place for people with consumptives, tuberculosis. And so you just envision that Olmsted did what he did to help Tufts with this healing aspect of Pinehurst. But then he also talked about something that we heard from the small area plan consultants. And he talked about how the eye is easily led like a horse being led by a rope. And he said Olmsted does landscapes that just lead the viewer with the curves and the plantings. And he mentioned Prospect Park up in, I guess, in Boston, where Mr. Tonell said he walked blisters on his feet because his eyes were just engaged in the landscape. So, it really, he had some pretty good, some neat ideas for us with how we can respond to any concerns of the Park Service. But, we've got to talk, council's got to talk about how we want to use him. But John, is anything that you heard that I haven't hit on?
Well, it was a very extensive interview, and my thought, and we will bring this up at another work session in some detail, is that there's two ways we might want to use this gentleman, if at all. But one would be to direct the village itself in management of and restoration of, if we choose to do so, the landscape heritage that we have from Frederick Law Olmsted into the future, and how would we do that? I think he would be an excellent resource for that. That ties in, of course, to the condition study that we're working on with the Park Service, and I think that Mr. Tonell could be very helpful in working with us and the Park Service in kind of understanding what Olmsted's intentions were and how those were documented and where we are today. I would also say I learned a couple of things from, a number of things from the discussion day, but one of them was that, as I think Lydia was alluding to, Olmsted generally had a sort of set of covenants or working understandings with the people or the institutions he was working for, whether it was New York City or Brooklyn or Pinehurst or places all around. And they weren't always written down in a list, but they were included in letters and correspondence. And so I took away from the meeting that we might want to work with the Tufts Archives and see if there's anything about the covenants, the purposes that Olmsted had in discussing the plan for Pinehurst with the Tufts family that we can learn from today and learn into how to maintain and his spirit and his ideas for Pinehurst.
That's what we got Jack Farrell working on right now.
Well, there you go.
Trying to, yeah.
Yeah, good. So anyway,
that came up with the same in this discussion that Natalie had with that other Olmsted expert.
Yes.
Earl Beveridge.
Yes,
the older
Mr. Beveridge in Massachusetts, who in fact kind of referred us to Mr. Tonell at this point in time. So I think we just need to be mindful of this resource that we have with Mr. Tonell and the Olmsted Society in planning some sort of event for next year on the one hand, in working on specific projects here in Pinehurst, and in working with the Park Service, going forward on our consulting study. But again, there's good resources out there for us to have advantage of as we go forward. So we wanted to identify this idea, and I'll work with Jeff to put this together a little bit further, and we'll have other discussions in the near term on how we want to use this person.
You guys see that story in the pilot on trees, and not the lady that gives tours in Weymouth about how trees give off like a film?
Ozone. They throw off an ozone.
But anyway, I thought it was kind of ironic, you know, we're dealing with a tree ordinance and they're talking about the therapeutic power of trees and pilot this week. And it was a great story and kind of ties right into.
Yeah,
everything.
I kind of felt in talking to this gentleman today that there's so many linkages into things that are important to the village, I think. Some of them you wouldn't necessarily feel or identify as important matters for the village to consider as we try to maintain our heritage and maintain our village and really all of our neighborhoods across all of our 17,000 residents. So this is an interesting, nice opportunity I think we have with him. The other business I just want to raise tonight for your thought is that at some point in time, I hope we'll come back and be able to all meet in person. And Jeff and I have talked a little bit about this. I don't see it happening until April. I think our next meeting will be pretty much as we've run today. But perhaps as early as April or May or whatever the council is comfortable with and whatever law allows, we'll come back to be able to meet in one place. And I don't want to do anything that's uncomfortable or recommend anything that's uncomfortable to any of us or the staff, and we'll certainly be respectful of that to set a date. But we are thinking of how that might be done. And Jeff, I haven't talked to you in a few days about this, but is there anything from the staff point of view about the council meeting or how the staff itself is working at this time that might reflect on our ability to be here?
Yeah, just a couple observations or thoughts on it. You know, if you go back and if you look at the the data on North Carolina's DHHS site, what we're seeing right now in terms of COVID numbers are about what we were seeing around the 1st of October last fall. And 1st of October last fall, we were doing in-person meetings and all of our facilities were open and we were looking forward to bigger and better things at that time. So there's that, to put it in context. I mentioned that, our entire staff has had the opportunity now to get the first shot. By the time your next meeting rolls around, we would all but a couple of us will have had the opportunity to get our second shot. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be fully protected at that time or as fully protected as we can be. I think it takes some time after the second shot. But, I guess what I'm saying is that, if you put this in the context of where we've been, it's probably okay to do it, to go live in the next one. But if you want to be real sure, then the one after that, we ought to be in a very good position, assuming numbers continue to go down. And at that point, all of us that had a desire to get vaccinated will be protected. So
I won't till the end of March have my second.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Second shot.
Yeah. Well, you're on the same timeline as the staff is then generally.
Yeah. So April makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know what you guys think.
April is fine.
Yeah.
First meeting in April?
Yep.
Go for it.
Well,
Yes, I can't wear my slippers.
Yes, you can.
I'm going to have to put the shirt in.
Get ice cream in between meetings.
I'll have to tuck my shirt in, and I don't like that.
well then, subject to unforeseen events or changes in circumstances, maybe we'll plan then, Jeff, in April, starting with our first meeting. Is that what I'm hearing from the council tonight, to be meeting back in person, again, subject to other events that might recommend we don't, but we have the option to do what we need to do. Okay. I really hesitate to mention the O word. That would be occupancy tax, but we need to keep thinking about this and get some direction. I will say yesterday, as a part of the train reception, I mentioned earlier, I was talking to Robbie Farrell. He actually approached me on a couple of subjects. And so I asked him about the occupancy tax, and it's quite clear that Aberdeen feels that the tax should be increased, full 3% in their view, but that the town should be part of that, should get a portion of that. So that just confirmed to me what I think Jeff had already knew from their town manager, that's their position, and as far as I know, Southern Pines has the same. So let's keep talking about this, but it would be nice to get a consensus on what to do. And Jane, I'll talk to you further about that. On your tax ID, I want to understand a little bit more about that. You've been good about presenting your view, and we haven't talked about it too much directly, so I'll do that with you.
Okay.
Are there other items for the future agenda, that work session, that people want to propose tonight? We'll record them down for later discussion.
Well, I'm still hanging out there with Focus Area 5. I don't want that lost in the sauce.
Okay. I agree. Any other items? Kevin, anything from your put on the agenda for a meeting, work session?
I think we have so much work to do.
We got a lot to do.
Knock
Judy?
out the work we already have. It's really what I want to focus on.
Judy?
Busy hands are happy hands.
I'm a similar mind to Kevin.
Could you repeat that? I didn't hear.
I'm of a similar mind to Kevin. We got a lot on our plate.
Got it.
Let's start moving that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lydia? Anything new?
Ditto. Same here.
Okay, we'll add to that list a little bit in the Ross and Olmsted concept and the local bill. All right. I think that brings us to the end of the work session, if we're all agreed, and we'll move into a closed meeting. So I need a motion to recess the work session and enter a closed session, please.
I move to recess the work session and enter into a closed session pursuant to NCGS section 143-318.11A5 to establish or to instruct the public body's staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease.
A second.
Motion by Jane Hogeman, a second by Lydia Bosch to enter into a closed session. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. We'll take a couple-minute break here while the staff closes up their activities, and then we'll get into the